Chapter 2896. However, there were also nurses from the hospital who came forward to expose. What? Yun Shirshir can't post on Weibo because she's still recuperating in the hospital. To think that Xingze protected her so much and even lost his life for her. At this moment, she was found to be pregnant. Great, now that she's pregnant, she can rely on her son's status again. The family is overjoyed, but poor Xingze is lying alone in the cold morgue, and she doesn't even look at him. Once this Weibo post was posted, it quickly became the headline. In fact, not only had Yun Shirshir woken up long ago, she had also visited Xingze twice. However, both times, she had secretly gone when no one was around. She knew that the memorial service would be held in 2 days. At that time, Xingze would be cremated and buried. She felt as if her heart was being torn apart when she thought about how a person who was once alive was about to turn into a thin wisp of bone ash. She only wanted to spend the little time she had left with him. When Yu saw this Weibo post, he was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. However, he did not dare to tell Yun Shirshir. At 6 p.m, Yun Shirshir sat on the bed and ate fruits with a numb expression. Mu Yaja was reviewing the company's financial report while eating bread. Gong Jia had also been guarding the ward for the past few days. When Yun Shirshir woke up and saw him, she was a little surprised and shocked. She was so surprised that she did not mention Yun Yeching's matter. When she was covering her forehead, she was not in the mood to care about his health. Her heart was in a mess. When she first woke up, she refused to eat anything. Gong Jia persuaded and begged her in every way possible before she finally drank some millet porridge. When Mu Yaja returned, the 2 men were in the ward. One was innocently begging her to drink Chinese medicine, while the other was trying his best to coax her. Only then did she obediently eat her food. It was not enough to rely on nutrient solutions alone. Only by eating on time could she ensure that her body was supplied with nutrients. After all, you are not alone now. Gong Jia reached out and patted her head, his eyes full of affection. For the sake of the little guy in your belly, you have to grit your teeth and eat it. Yun Shirshir listened to him and obediently cooperated. After dinner, Yun Shirshir gently wiped her lips with a wet towel and said calmly, "I want to go to Gu Xingze's memorial service." Upon hearing this, the man turned to look at her in surprise. What? Mu Yaja also looked up at her. "Mommy, you can't walk around now. You can't go anywhere." Yu said immediately. Yun Shirshir curled her lips as if she had known that they would not allow it. She said helplessly, "I'm just going to a memorial service. Are you not allowing it?" Without waiting for Gong Jia to speak, Mu Yaja immediately said, "There will be many fans at the memorial service. Not only fans, but there will also be major media outlets and A-list celebrities. The memorial service venue is very big and can accommodate thousands of people. This is only the inner venue. When the time comes, the outer venue will definitely be surrounded by fans. You are now at the cusp of the storm. You shouldn't go. I'm only going to see him for the last time." Yun Shirshir emphasized again and again, "Can I do that?" No. Mu Yaja was resolute and resolute. Chapter 2897. Gong Jia said solemnly, "Sister, you shouldn't go. There will be a sea of people at such an event. Even if you don't get squeezed, bumped, or hurt, I'm afraid that you won't be able to control yourself. If you start crying, who will be able to stop you? Also, you can't see. How are you going to see him for the last time?" Yun Shirshir's eyes reddened when she heard this. "Shao Jia, can you go with me? Even if I can't see him for the last time, I'll send him on his last journey." Gong Jia couldn't bear to reject her plea. He looked at Mu Yaja and then at her. He sighed and said, "Even if I agree, brother-in-law might not agree to let you go. Moreover, your eyes aren't big enough to see anything. If you get hurt, even if brother-in-law doesn't feel bad, I will. Gong Jie, who was usually as unruly as a lion, was acting like a spoiled child to him. Mu Yaja glanced at him from the corner of his eyes before nodding in satisfaction. This was probably one of the rare things that he and his brother-in-law could agree on at the same time. Yun Shirshir felt even more desolate when she heard this. Her lips trembled, and she said in a trembling voice, "Shao Jia, if I don't see him for the last time, I won't be able to forgive myself. I only hope that I can be by his side in his last moments. Even if I don't say anything, I can just stand there silently from afar." Gong Jie looked at Mu Yaja awkwardly. Mu Yaja didn't insist. Seeing how persistent she was, he took a deep breath and smiled. "If you insist on going, then I have a condition. Let me accompany you, okay?" Okay. As long as she could go, she would accept any condition. Mu Yaja wanted to accompany her because he was worried that something might go wrong on the way. Even if something happened, he would feel at ease if he was by her side. At least, she wouldn't be so helpless if she encountered danger again. Since Yun Shirshir was hospitalized, very few people came to visit her. It was not because she was not popular, but because very few people knew that she was hospitalized. She didn't tell anyone that she had an accident and was in the hospital. Other than Gong Jie, Hua Jin, Qin Zhou, several senior executives of the company, and director Ji Lin, almost no one knew about it. No one came to visit, so it was rather peaceful. Instead, she would be able to sleep better. Mu Yaja agreed to accompany her to Gu Xing's memorial service, which made her feel extremely gratified. Before the memorial service was held, Qin Zhou led some people to pack up Gu Xing's belongings. When Qin Zhou was packing up his belongings, he accidentally found his patient's medical report. Medical records? He opened it and read it. Despite the doctor's own scribbling, he could still make out that his condition was worse than he had imagined. Severe anxiety and insomnia, along with the medical records. There was also a diary. Gu Xingze never had the habit of keeping a diary, but after reading the first entry, Qin Zhou guessed that the doctor had probably asked him to write this diary. From the diary, he found out that he hadn't slept well for more than half a month. Qin Zhou suddenly realized that Gu Xingze hadn't slept well for a long time since his last visit. His complexion was extremely pale, and it took a lot of effort to put on makeup. Chapter 2898. However, the media that went to visit him found out that he was using a body double, so they used him as a big shot to hype up his news. As a heavenly idol, Gu Xingze's every move would be the center of attention. What the media wanted was a hot topic and exposure. As the center of attention, Gu Xingze's psychological burden became heavier. The doctor told me to write a diary, to record the beautiful details of my life, even if it was a small detail. However, I realized that I don't even have a life of my own. My every move is under the eyes of others. How can there be beautiful details? My dream is to be able to fall asleep when I close my eyes and wake up naturally. If I leave, please don't lock me in that cold tomb. If one day I really turn into a pile of ashes, please let me embrace freedom. Qin Zhou closed the diary and did not force himself to finish reading it. The more he read, the more suffocated he felt. He continued to pack until he found a video camera and a stack of documents in the drawer. When he opened the documents, he was surprised to find that Gu Xingze had already drafted his will and distributed his assets. All the rules and regulations were clearly laid out, and they had all been notarized. Gu Xingze had a lot of assets in Beijing. Other than a few ridiculously expensive prime real estate, he had invested in and developed these real estate. Naturally, other than the real estate, the company's shares had also been divided in advance. Villas, resorts, entertainment centers, production companies. As an artist, Gu Xingze had a high income. These high incomes were all used for investment. His life was not full of luxury. On the contrary, compared to other male stars, his life could be described as pure and simple. Qin Zhou did not know why he had signed so many documents in advance. What kind of health condition did he have that made him sign so many documents in one go? In his account, half of the 9-figure assets were used for public welfare. Gu Xingze had already signed the documents for the division of assets. What made Qin Zhou even more heartbroken was that Gu Xingze's inheritance list included him. A commercial office building in the CBD was under his name. What surprised him even more was that he had actually signed the volunteer donation form. He flipped it open and glanced at it. His pupils violently contracted. Unknowingly, in the blink of an eye, the day of the memorial service arrived. For some reason, perhaps even the heavens felt pity for him. Early in the morning, the sky began to drizzle. The entire sky was gray, and the world was dark and damp, as if it was also crying for him. At 10 a.m., the fans arrived at the memorial hall. However, only a few hundred fans were allowed to enter the memorial hall. Moreover, they were only allowed to enter the main entrance. They were not allowed to enter the memorial hall. However, there were still many loyal fans who rushed over from various places and waited outside the door in the drizzle. The sky was dark, and the fans were standing guard outside the door. Soon, the funeral car carrying the coffin slowly drove into the funeral parlor. The fans immediately guessed that Gu Xingze's body was in the hearse. Before the fans came, they had made an agreement with each other that they must abide by the rules of the venue, obey the instructions, and not cause any unnecessary trouble for the memorial service of their beloved idols. Chapter 2899. However, there were also fans who couldn't control their sadness. It wasn't until the funeral car passed by them that the fans collectively burst into tears as if the world had collapsed. There were even crazy fans who went up to hit the car door and wailed, "Xingze, don't leave us! Xingze, wake up! Xingze, Xingze!" Sob. Everyone was infected by the desperate and helpless cries as tears streamed down their faces. The Memorial Hall of Beijing's Hongyang Funeral Parlor had been fully decorated. Many celebrities sent wreaths. Many celebrities came to offer their condolences. Most of them were artistes who had worked with Gu Xingze before, and they offered their condolences. At 8 o'clock in the morning, many celebrities rushed to the scene in their nanny vans. It was unknown if they were sincere or if they were just putting on an act. It was as if they were trying to match the atmosphere. Regardless of whether they were male or female, they all burst into tears. After all, attending such an occasion with fans and the media present, if they didn't shed a single tear, they would be reported as cold-blooded by the media and accused by the fans of having a heart of stone. This was especially so for Lin Ji. Even though she wasn't on the invitation list for the memorial, she knew that this was a rare opportunity to create hype. Gu Xingze's memorial service was extremely sensational. More than 100 media outlets would attend, and there would be overwhelming coverage. If she were to participate, she would definitely be able to gain a lot of exposure. Of course, she had to put on an act. Her acting skills were not bad. To begin with, it was not difficult for her to shed a few tears. Therefore, as soon as she got out of the nanny van, Lin Ji covered her face with a handkerchief. Her eyes were red, and her emotions had been brewing on the way here. After getting out of the car, she was supported by her assistant as she cried all the way to the memorial hall. Qin Zhou stood at the door, dressed in black. When he suddenly saw Lin Ji walking towards the memorial hall, he was stunned for a moment and quickly gritted his teeth in anger. This Lin Ji, even at this time, she still didn't forget to create hype. When Lin Ji walked to his side, he warned her fiercely, "Since you're uninvited, please don't cause trouble at the memorial service. Otherwise, I'll definitely ban you." Lin Ji was shocked by Qin Zhou's threatening words. She said aggrievedly, "I'm sincerely here to send Xingzhou off. I've always respected Senior Xingze for so many years. That's for the best." After Qin Zhou finished speaking, he no longer looked at her. Lin Ji patted her chest lightly, wiped her tears guiltily, and walked into the venue. Outside the door, the fans followed the arrangement of the venue staff and lined up. There were only 20 minutes left before the memorial service began. Some of them couldn't help but discuss among themselves. "Do you think Yun Shishir will come today?" "I think so." After all, she had starred in her first film with Gu Xingze as the male and female lead. Moreover, they had acted in a reality show together as imaginary lovers. Moreover, the recently completed production of Extreme Youth was co-starred by her and Gu Xingze. She should be coming. If it weren't for Xingze, Yun Shishir definitely wouldn't have become so popular. I like her because she acted with Xingze in The Green Apple. If it weren't for Xingze, who would have noticed her? Chapter 2900. Just as the fans were discussing animatedly, a nanny van sped through the entrance of the funeral parlor. Everyone couldn't help but look over. The black Mercedes-Benz stopped steadily. In the car, Yun Shishir leaned against the back seat uneasily. She felt the car stop and couldn't help but feel even more nervous. She was wearing a black dress today. For today's memorial service, the Gong Jia had accompanied her and specially bought a simple but elegant black dress. She didn't have any makeup on. There weren't many embellishments on her clear face. She only wore a pair of black sunglasses to block out the wind and light. Because of her eye injury, the doctor didn't say much when he found out that she was going to attend the memorial service. Instead, he repeatedly asked her to wear sunglasses. Her eyes had become extremely fragile now. Even a weak wind would cause further damage to her eyes. Yun Shishir obeyed him obediently. "Have we arrived?" she asked carefully, keeping her voice very low. Mu Yaja said, "Yes, we're here." "Wait a moment." He opened the car door first. When the media saw that it was him, they all crowded around and went crazy for the license plates. When Mu Yaja saw the media surrounding them with their cameras, he thought that these strong spotlights would definitely cause damage to her eyes. Hence, he immediately ordered the bodyguards that he had brought along with him to separate the media reporters. When the media saw that he had come prepared with 2 strong bodyguards, they naturally didn't dare to be presumptuous. Moreover, in such an occasion, if the artiste wasn't willing to cooperate, they wouldn't be persistent. Hence, they obediently retreated to the side and didn't make things difficult for them. Mu Yaja turned around and held Yun Shishir's hand, helping her out of the car. Her eyesight was already very low, and she was close to blindness. However, with the weak light, she could still distinguish some things. After she got out of the car and steadied herself, she held his arm and said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go in." When the fans saw Yun Shishir holding Mu Yaja's arm and walking over, they couldn't help but get excited. "Look, it's really Yun Shishir." "Is she not wearing any makeup? I think she's barefaced, but she's still so pretty. Her skin is so fair, without any blemishes." "Yes, I admit that I was scared. She's elegant and pretty, but why is she wearing sunglasses?" "Many celebrities wear sunglasses." One of the fans suddenly said angrily, "If you wear sunglasses, won't you be able to hide your indifference?" When attending funerals, many celebrities would wear sunglasses. However, the situation of wearing sunglasses was different. In some cases, it was to hide the traces of their true sadness. When a celebrity passed away, celebrities from all walks of life would attend the funeral. Some were unrelated, while some were related, but the depth of their relationship was different. After all, some were close friends, and some were just friends who had acted in the same movie together. Needless to say, those celebrities who were close to the deceased were grieving. Those who were deeply in love with the deceased did not eat or drink for 3 days, washing their faces with tears all day long. If such a close friend appeared at the funeral, he would definitely look haggard and lose all his elegance. Chapter 2901. After all, celebrities had to rely on their image to make a living. Moreover, there were so many paparazzi at the scene. If someone took a photo of her swollen eyes, it would be too embarrassing. However, most of the time, she wore sunglasses to hide her indifference. Only a few celebrities came for the sake of love at the funeral. More celebrities used the funeral of a big star as an opportunity to show themselves. Because other than the various award ceremonies, the funeral of a big star should be the most crowded occasion for celebrities. In the middle of a funeral, and their feelings had not reached that level, the sadness they squeezed out would look fake, no matter how one looked at it. Hence, they could only use sunglasses to hide it, letting kind people think that the pairs of eyes behind the sunglasses that were not even what were already red from crying. Other than that, it was to prevent sneak shots. Of course, this was also a kind of cover-up. It usually happened to female celebrities. Female celebrities would definitely compete in public, but funerals seemed to be the only place that was not suitable for female celebrities to show off their talents. There was no need for color, nor was there a need for the atmosphere. Once female celebrities gave up on their gorgeous clothes and makeup, most of them would lose confidence in their image. A pair of sunglasses was equivalent to saying that they were in an imperfect state, because they knew that the entertainment reporters, who were everywhere, would never miss a celebrity's funeral. It was popular for celebrities to wear sunglasses at funerals. After all, as celebrities, they were always acting. When they attended the funeral, they did not forget that they were actors. The fan said sarcastically, "I think she must be here to freeload off the exposure, right?" Ever since her debut, she's been freeloading off Xingza's popularity. But Xingza is no longer around. Even at the last moment, she didn't forget to freeload off his popularity. Besides, look at her. Her face is so clean. She didn't shed a single tear. She even came with Mu Yaja on her arm. Isn't this obviously freeloading off the media's exposure? That's right. I also realized that she didn't cry much at all. Could it be that she's wearing sunglasses to hide her tears? How annoying. I didn't expect her to be such a person. If it weren't for Xingza supporting her, who would remember her name? Since she didn't have any feelings for Xingza, why did she reluctantly attend the memorial service? Humph. She must be here to freeload off the exposure. All the media outlets are here for Xingza's memorial service today. It's such a good opportunity. So, of course, she wants to freeload. Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, did not hear these whispers. She was not in the mood to care about other people and things at the scene. Her heart was heavy, as if a huge rock was pressing down on her. She tried hard to suppress her emotions and held back her tears as much as possible as she slowly walked into the memorial hall. Qin Zhou was standing at the door. When he saw her, he bowed slightly and hugged her. Qin Zhou was inevitably surprised by her arrival. "Why are you here?" Qin Zhou paused for a moment before adding, "Actually, it doesn't matter if you don't come." "Qin Zhou, Yun Shirshir couldn't hold it in any more. She sobbed and said, "I'm here to send him off." "Are you okay?" Qin Zhou saw her in this state. She didn't seem to be optimistic. Not good at all. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, I lost my composure." Chapter 2902. Are you okay? Qin Zhou saw that she was not in a good state. "No, I'm not okay at all." Yun Shirshir took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I lost my composure. Chinzhou's heart ached when he saw this. However, he could deeply understand Yun Shirshir's pain. But now, he couldn't comfort her at such a time, because even he didn't know how to calm his emotions. Don't cry. Xingzi definitely hopes that you can live well and be happy forever. My condolences. She was wearing sunglasses, but it couldn't hide her haggard expression. As soon as Chinzhou finished speaking, she took a deep breath again, but didn't say anything in the end. Mu Yaja helped her slowly into the memorial hall. In the memorial hall, there were sad sobs. Looking around, other than the celebrities, there were also many A-list celebrities and celebrities. Many female and male celebrities were wearing sunglasses, perfectly hiding the expressions on their faces. However, it was unknown if these sobs were acting or if they were expressing their true feelings. Yun Shirshir stood in the corner with a wooden expression, quietly waiting with her head lowered. For a moment, her thoughts were in a mess. For a moment, her mind was blank. Even though there was a commotion around her, she seemed to be unable to hear anything. Her heartache constantly reminded her of where she was at this moment. Gu Xingzi's memorial service. It was as if a lifetime had passed. Things remained the same, but people had changed. Yun Shirshir clenched her fists tightly and tried her best to hold back her tears. This was what she had promised. She would definitely send him off with a smile. If there really was a heaven and a soul, Xingzi probably wouldn't want to see her tears, right? The memorial service was about to begin. Han Yuyen, on the other hand, was the last to make her appearance. She had deliberately chosen this time. Perhaps it was because she was participating in some fashion week or walking the red carpet of a film festival. She was already used to being the last. Hence, even if it was a funeral, she was still used to being late. When she got out of the nanny van just now, many media outlets saw that she was attending the funeral and surrounded her with their cameras. Yuyen, why did you decide to attend the memorial service today? I heard that after you and Gu Xingzi started dating. Your love turned into hatred. The two of you fell apart and stopped contacting each other for a long time. Is attending Xingzi's funeral to bury the hatchet? Amidst the flashing lights, many media outlets pointed their microphones at her. Han Yuyen stood still, faced the camera, and elegantly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and swollen because of her sadness. I'm really sad about Xingzi's departure. There are some topics that I really shouldn't talk about, but I deeply regret Xingzi's leaving. I only hope that he can rest in peace. Hopefully, everything will be fine in heaven. Han Yuyen read the interview script that the company had prepared early in the morning and acted with all her might. Her tears moved many of the fans present. I heard that Han Yuyen and Master Xingzi dated for a period of time. In that case, it should be considered as an old love, right? I didn't expect Han Yuyen to be so loyal. She ignored the criticism and attended Lord Xingzi's memorial service. This means that she's sincere to Xingzi. Han Yuyen's tears won the favor of many fans. Chapter 2903. She even pretended to be hurt. After the media interview, she walked into the memorial hall crying and wiping her tears. Her footsteps were soft, and she staggered. Her assistant supported her, as if she was going to faint the next moment. After entering the memorial hall, without the media following her, she finally let down her guard. She quickly wiped her tears with a wet towel and stood in the crowd. Han Yuyen glanced at the media outside the door and deliberately avoided them in the corner. She asked softly, "Did they take a bad picture of me just now?" The assistant smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. I saw it just now. You cried beautifully just now. When the media takes a picture and posts it online, The fans will definitely be stunned by your beautiful face. Han Yuyen's lips curled into a smug smile. If one could cry beautifully like a fairy, that was also a skill. Many female celebrities were beautiful when they were still, but when they acted in a crying scene, it was simply unsightly. Han Yuyen, on the other hand, had become famous because of her weeping scenes. Unfortunately, this conversation was heard by Yun Shirshir. Just based on the recognition of the voice, she was able to recognize who the voice belonged to. Han Yuyen. Were those tears just now squeezed out for the media to see? Recalling her words just now, Yun Shirshir suddenly felt as if she had swallowed a fly alive. A turbid breath brewed in her chest. It was difficult to swallow, but she couldn't vent it out. She couldn't help but say coldly, "You won't even let go of the memorial service. Even if it's Xingza's memorial service, you still want to use it to create hype." Han Yuyen's back stiffened. She turned around abruptly and saw Yun Shirshir. Just as she was about to retort, she caught sight of the man who was protecting Yun Shirshir like a guardian angel. Muyaja? Why is he here too? Seeing that she had turned around, Muyaja also turned his gaze and glanced at her, but it was extremely cold and indifferent. Han Yuyen shuddered and hurriedly turned around. With Muyaja around, Han Yuyen really didn't dare to have any conflict with Yun Shirshir. The memorial service finally began. The live broadcast began to play Gu Xingza's music. The first song was a cover of Gu Xingza's song, Keywords, in his concert. Because of this song, Gu Xingza won the Peak Music chart. Love yourself. Someone will love you. That's an optimistic statement. The appearance of happiness I feel so real. Can't find an adjective. Silence is masking. Overflowing passion, only the particle remains. Have a kind of steadiness when you say, my name position of fallen leaves. Compose a poem. Time is disappearing. Our story begins. This is the first time. Show me that love can be both generous and selfish. You are my keyword. Keywords. Upon hearing this song, Yun Shirshir froze all over. She could still remember the scene of their first date in the coffee shop during the recording of the Love Diary. She had forgotten all the plot, but she had never forgotten it. He walked up to the small stage and sat in front of the tripod piano. He played the song affectionately and sang by himself. I'm not sure. The best way to love be a verb or noun. I'd love to tell you. The most erotic of feelings, but I forget the words. Sometimes we meet and sometimes we part. Crying and laughing are also matters. I'm not afraid of subtext. Have a kind of steadiness. My name is in your heart position of fallen leaves. Compose a poem. Our story. Just about to begin. This is the first time. To love someone so generously and selfishly. You are my keyword. Chapter 2904. She knew very well that these plots were all according to the script. However, he sang so affectionately and completely revealed his true feelings. Every line of the lyrics was filled with strong emotions, as if they were about to burst out. She pursed her lips tightly, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. She remembered that there was a gathering in the production team. The director had coaxed Gu Xingza to sing a song. Gu Xingza sang, "Excuse me," without hesitation. Now, Gu Xingza's song was played in the memorial hall again. However, Yun Shirshir couldn't bear it and broke down completely. I lost contact. A dream woke me up. The tears in the corners of my eyes are the traces of your departure. Just when I wanted to cherish love has expired. First, I'm too slow. It's too late. Hugging. You're back if you decide to leave. Why do you want to stay if you don't plan to stay together? Why do you want to hold hands? So you only borrowed from me, but I mistook you for a rainbow that fell from the sky once. You only borrowed from me. Now, but you forgot to return it to me. Amidst the music, Gu Xingza's black coffin was slowly carried in. At that moment, the memorial hall suddenly erupted with sad cries. Xingza, she silently called out his name in her heart. She couldn't see the coffin being placed on the stage, but she could vaguely hear the cries coming from the side. Senior Xingza, sob, 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 Xingza, many people were calling out his name. However, Yun Shirshir couldn't hear anything. Originally, she could still recognize some of the scenery, but now she couldn't see anything clearly. The entire world had lost all light and was plunged into darkness. She couldn't hear any noise. In her world, it was so quiet that only the sound of her breathing could be heard. Xingza, so he only borrowed from her. But she thought he was a rainbow that fell from the sky. Give Xingza back to me, okay? She prayed in her heart. Her fragile heart seemed to be swallowed by tears. Give Xingza back to me. Give Xingza back to me. Yun Shirshir couldn't stand steadily. The memorial service began. Huan Yu's higher-ups went on stage to give a speech. On the Gu family's side, it was naturally inconvenient for Gu Jinglian to appear. Hence, the memorial service was handed over to Qin Zhou. Qin Zhou walked up the stage without any manuscripts. He first took a deep look at the black coffin, then took a deep breath and said with tears in his eyes, "In the more than 10 years that I've known Xingza, I've never regretted not accompanying him properly. I claim to be his close family, but as a family member, I didn't cherish my time with him." There was another sob to be heard. Xingza has been filming for many years. He's very serious about his work and has invested a lot in it. After many years of filming, his body has suffered from many illnesses. He did not have any family and had grown up abroad. In private, he was a man of few words. To Zingto his Xingza, to his life. Xingza to Stu Zingto his, to Stu to Xing. However, not all stories had happy endings. But I hope that today, at the last moment of his life, he will leave a beautiful memory in everyone's hearts. Youth was like water coming and going like an arrow. Chapter 2905. In Xingza's diary, there's a line in the lyrics, "Who in the world doesn't feel like a purgatory? I won't cry. I have no dignity to give up. When one day those dreams drown in the sea of people, don't be sad. Let him go. This song will be a funeral. He has left, but I still sincerely wish him a good rest." Following that, Qin Zhou announced that the guests present would circle the venue to mourn. All the guests formed a long line and slowly surrounded the coffin to mourn. There was a small window right above the coffin. The small window opened, revealing Gu Xingza's calm and pale face. He lay quietly in the coffin as if he had fallen asleep. Mu Yaja supported Yun Shirshir and circled the venue in mourning. Yun Shirshir tried her best to open her eyes, wanting to see him for the last time. However, no matter how hard she tried, it was in vain. She really couldn't see. She couldn't see anything. Xingza, Yun Shirshir took a deep breath and held back her tears. Then she said calmly, "Goodbye, Xingza. I will live on strong." With that, with Mu Yaja's support, she walked to the coffin and gently placed a bouquet of flowers on the coffin. After the memorial service ended, Gu Xingza's body was pushed to be cremated. Knowing this result and thinking that he was about to turn into a pile of ashes, Yun Shirshir's heart ached so much that she was about to suffocate. Mu Yaja had been by her side from the beginning to the end. Although she didn't shed a single tear, he could tell that she was sad. So sad that she couldn't even shed a tear. He was glad that he was by her side. Otherwise, he was really afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through this. After the cremation ceremony, Qin Zhou saw that Yun Shirshir wasn't in a good state of mind, so he instructed Mu Yaja to help her back first. However, when Mu Yaja helped Yun Shirshir out of the memorial hall, a group of fans saw Yun Shirshir walking out. The fans were crying miserably, especially the music that was playing on the radio. It was extremely tear-inducing. However, when they saw Yun Shirshir walk out, they saw that she was still wearing a pair of sunglasses. She clearly did not shed any tears, but she looked like she was walking unsteadily. She even needed someone to support her. Many fans felt that Yun Shirshir's performance was extremely hypocritical. Many fans were talking about it. You can't even squeeze out a single tear, and you're still pretending to be exhausted from crying. Isn't that too fake? I saw her wearing sunglasses when she went in. Who would wear sunglasses to a memorial service? I think she just can't shed any tears. She can't even cry. If they didn't attend this memorial service perfunctorily, they were just trying to ride on Xingjia's popularity. Shameless bitch. She should touch her conscience and think about it. The reason why she's so popular is all because of Xingjia's popularity. Yun Shirshir, you hypocritical liar, get out of the entertainment industry. Someone suddenly shouted at her. When Yun Shirshir heard it, she stopped in her tracks and looked up blankly. Then, an unknown object flew toward her. She couldn't see anything at all, but Mu Yaja's eyesight was sharp. He quickly blocked in front of her. An unknown object smashed into his back. With a thud, the object fell to the ground. Mu Yaja took a closer look. It was a high heel that someone had thrown at him. Mu Yaja's eyes were instantly filled with anger. He suddenly looked up and glanced at the crowd. His voice suddenly turned gloomy. Who threw it? Chapter 2906. The scene suddenly fell into dead silence. Mu Yaja shouted coldly, I'm asking who threw it? The lone, high-heeled shoe lay silently on the ground. Yun Shirshir immediately grabbed his arm. Forget it, forget it. Yun Shirshir smiled. Today is Xingjia's funeral. I don't want to make it too ugly. Mu Yaja pursed his lips. Although he was extremely angry, since Yun Shirshir said so, he did not intend to pursue the matter too much. However, just as he turned around, the fans could no longer hold it in and started to jeer. Many fans started to clamor. Yun Shirshir, you be asterisk TCH. The scene suddenly went out of control. You're happy now, but where's Lord Xingjia? He's lying alone in a cold coffin. Many fans started to surround them. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. He had brought bodyguards with him this time, but there were only 3 or 4 people in total. A few fans lost their minds and rushed towards Yun Shirshir. The remaining fans were also enraged and swarmed forward. Mu Yaja could not stop them at all. He was worried that these fans would hurt Yun Shirshir, so he immediately hugged her tightly in his arms. Many fans rushed over and shoved them, grabbing their clothes, hair, and arms. The bodyguards immediately rushed over and formed a circle surrounding Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja. In the chaotic scene, many fans lost control and threw the things in their hands at them. Shoes, apples, flowers, whatever they had in their hands was thrown at her. Yun Shirshir stood rooted to the ground, letting the insults and attacks completely drown her. Even though the fans were crazily pushing her, insulting her, and grabbing her hair, her eyes were still empty and indifferent. Take off your damn sunglasses. A fan rushed forward and gave her a tight slap. Slap. The sunglasses fell to the ground. The gauze on Yun Shirshir's eyes was also exposed to the air. However, no fans noticed this detail and continued to accuse her crazily. Mu Yaja abruptly pushed away the troublesome fans and hugged her tightly in his arms. His large palm pressed against the back of her head and protected her head against his chest. He angrily said, "Get lost." But no one cared. I hate Yun Shirshir. Get out of the entertainment industry. Get out of the entertainment industry. Yun Shirshir, you are a vixen through and through. You were the one who seduced Sir Xingzhe, used him to climb up the social ladder, and used his popularity to hype yourself up. If it weren't for Lord Xingzhe, you wouldn't have such popularity and status. Ever since the green apple, You've been using Gu Xingze to create hype until the Love Diary, where you used the lucky couple CP to solidify your popularity. However, you don't even have the basic respect for Lord Xingze's memorial service. He didn't even shed a single tear. He was even wearing sunglasses. You don't deserve Lord Xingze to treat you so well. From the Love Diary, I can tell that Lord Xingze doesn't take care of you like an ordinary senior does for a junior. He really likes you. But Yun Shirshir, what have you done for him? Yun Shirshir closed her eyes and listened to the insults and accusations. However, her heart was like a dead pool of water without any ripples. This was her sin, and she deserved it. Chapter 2907. At this moment, one of the fans suddenly screamed, hysterically, "Yun Shirshir, do you know what I hate the most about you? I hate it when you pretend to be innocent." Her back stiffened, and she turned around abruptly. The fan scolded angrily again. "If it weren't for you, Sir Xingze wouldn't have died. If it weren't for protecting you, he wouldn't have suffered such serious injuries. He wouldn't even have a chance to be saved. You're the one who caused his death. If it weren't for you, Sir Xingze wouldn't have died." When Yun Shirshir heard this, her mind went blank. "Yun Shirshir, you don't deserve to live. You're the one who deserves to die. Why don't you die? Why don't you die? Why aren't you the one who died?" Yun Shirshir's face was as pale as snow. Her pale and colorless lips trembled. She suddenly turned around. Her sallow face was devoid of any color. The gauze on her eyes had also fallen, somewhere due to the pushing and shoving of the crowd. Her body was in a mess, and she was in a sorry state. She bit her lip hard and suddenly smiled bitterly. Her voice trembled as she said, "I'm sorry." The crowd fell silent. Yun Shirshir's hair was scattered messily on her back. Facing the emotional fans, she curled her lips, but tears gently slid down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I really wanted to send him off with a smile, so I held back my tears. I didn't know. I really didn't know that tears were a form of respect for him. I'm sorry. I wore sunglasses because I didn't want him to see my injured eyes. I wanted him to leave in peace without any reluctance. I'm sorry. It's me. It's all me. I'm the one who deserves to die, and I'm also the one who doesn't deserve to live. But I also want to. If I could do it all over again, or if I could choose, I'd be willing to exchange my life for his. I can't bear for him to leave. I don't want him to leave either." Yun Shirshir continued to sob. "But he's gone. He won't wake up. If crying is useful, if tears can bring him back, I will cry seriously." She apologized to them in the most humble way. Apologized to Gu Xingze's fans. After Gu Xingze left, she had so many apologies in her heart. Thousands of apologies, but she had no one to talk to. Her apology touched some of her fans, but the majority of them did not accept her apology at all. "Yun Shirshir, stop putting on an act. Do you think we'll believe your words? Do you think they'll believe that you're apologizing sincerely?" One of the agitated fans shouted angrily, "Yun Shirshir, you are shameless. What was the point of saying all this now? I heard that when you were in danger back then, Lord Xingze was seriously injured in order to protect you. He didn't even have the chance to be rescued. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for a jinx like you, Lord Xingze wouldn't have left us. Give Lord Xingze back to us. Hurry up and give Lord Xingze back to us. We won't forgive you. We won't forgive you. Yun Shirshir, die, die, die. Ah, die for Lord Xingze." Chapter 2908. There were even more crazy fans who rushed towards her, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they pounced on her. "Ah! Yun Shirshir, I'm going to kill you." Yun Shirshir was not afraid at all. Even if she was engulfed by this anger, she was fearless. Mu Yaja looked at her ashen face and knew that she was in such a state. Because of all the humiliation, she must have lost all hope. Hence, she did not even have the basic resistance or excuses. He hugged her, feeling sorry for her. There were fans who kept rushing towards her and attacking her. Mu Yaja silently bore the attacks for her and protected her in his arms. However, he did not say anything in the end. Based on his strength, these fans were weak, and they were all girls. How much strength could they have? They were no match for him at all. However, she felt that she was carrying a heavy burden of sin. She felt that she had let down Gu Xing's fans. Hence, she wanted to bear with all these injuries as atonement. However, he could not bear for her to bear such a heavy burden of sin. Then he would bear it. He would bear it for her. He would bear all these sins for her. He would atone for her. He would bear all these injuries for her. Countless fists fell on his shoulders, the back of his head, and his back like a violent storm. Mu Yaja remained silent and clenched his teeth tightly. Yun Shirshir suddenly realized something. She lifted her head and saw his forbearing expression. She grabbed his collar tightly. Don't! Mu Yaja bit his lips tightly and tried his best to protect her. It was as if he had lost all feeling in his body. At this moment, an unknown object flew towards her, from not too far away. Dong! She felt a dull pain, and Yun Shirshir was hit on the back of her head. It was only when the object landed on the ground that everyone realized that it was a rock the size of a fist. Yun Shirshir's vision suddenly turned pitch black, and she felt a sharp pain at the back of her head. Following that, sticky blood flowed down along her hair. Mu Yaja was so shocked that his face turned pale. His heart ached as he hugged Yun Shirshir's shoulders and cupped her face. Shirshir. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. Who threw the stone? Some fans came to their senses and looked at each other before looking around. Shirshir, but she couldn't hear anything. Mu Yaja's anxious voice was drowned out by the noise. She closed her eyes, and her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. It was as if she had been consigned to eternal damnation, and she allowed the angry curses to drown her at the hospital. Yun Shirshir was lying on the hospital bed. The wound caused by the stone had been bandaged. It was not a particularly serious wound, but for some reason he had been unconscious for a day and a night, and there were still no signs of him waking up. Mu Yaja stayed by her bedside and watched over her. He had not slept for a day and a night, and he had not taken care of himself. Stubble had appeared on his chin. After Gu Xing's memorial service, she had not woken up. Perhaps she did not want to wake up. Faced with this cruel reality, she had subconsciously chosen to sleep. She had not eaten for a day and a night, and her body was weak. She had relied on the nutrient solution to maintain her body's needs. However, this alone was far from enough. She was still pregnant, and the fetus in her womb needed nourishment. It was far from enough to rely on the nutrient solution. Chapter 2909. Gong Jia sat by the window. No one knew how long he had been in this position, but he was like a stone statue. 2 days later, after sleeping for 48 hours, Yun Shirshir finally woke up. However, after waking up, she was like a puppet that did not know how to laugh or cry. She was like a puppet without a soul. She was either sitting at the head of the bed in a daze or lying quietly on the bed. Her empty eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. She didn't eat or drink. She didn't know if she was torturing herself or forcing herself. He brought the bowl of porridge over and sat on the edge of the bed. He scooped up a spoonful and gently fed it to his sister. His throat moved a little as he choked on his sobs. Sis, look at me. Look at me, okay? Have some porridge. Even a little bit is good. You haven't eaten for 4 days and 4 nights. Xingxia is already dead, but he definitely didn't want to see you in such a dispirited state. Big sister, wake up, okay? Don't be like this anymore. I want you to be well. I want you to be well. No matter how he comforted her, no matter how he coaxed her, Yun Shirshir always looked out of the window motionlessly. Her body seemed to be frozen, and her eyes were dim, without any luster. She didn't know what she was looking at. Outside the window, there was only a clear sky and white clouds. However, in the ward, it was cold, dark, and devoid of any light. The sunlight was so bright that it shone into the windowsill, but it couldn't shine into her heart. She seemed to be dead, and the living thing was just a shell. Her heart had completely died on the day of the memorial service, and it would be difficult for her to come back to life. Mu Yaja stood at the door of the ward. His back was straight, but there was a hint of loneliness and bleakness on his back. She was in this state every day. When she woke up, she would lie on the bed motionlessly. She didn't eat or drink, and there was no expression on her face, other than her biological needs. She would never think of getting out of bed and walking around. Sometimes he would sit in one place for an entire day, not moving at all. Be it Mu Yaja, Yu Yu, Xiao Chen, or even Gong Jia, everyone took turns feeding her. But no matter how he coaxed or lied to her, she just stared ahead indifferently. It was as if all the light in her eyes had been extinguished and there was no focus in the darkness. It wasn't as if Mu Yaja hadn't tried to force it in. However, every time he forced it in, he would vomit it out in less than 10 minutes. There was nothing he could do. He really couldn't think of any other way to coax her to eat. Sometimes she would sit by the window and look out. Once he sat down, the night sky was filled with stars. Seeing that she still refused to eat, Gong Jia put the bowl aside, held her hand tightly, and gently kissed the back of her hand. Sister, even if you don't want to eat, can you talk to me? I haven't heard your voice in a long time. Sis, you haven't eaten for days, and you haven't talked to me. We promised each other when we were young that even if we quarreled, we wouldn't have a Cold War. Are you having a Cold War with us now? Yun Shirshir's eyelashes fluttered slightly, as if she had some reaction. Gong Jia immediately picked up the bowl, scooped a spoonful of millet porridge, and brought it close to her mouth. He coaxed, "Eat a little, just a little." Chapter 29:10. Gong Jia immediately picked up the bowl, scooped a spoonful of millet porridge, and brought it close to her mouth. He coaxed, "Eat a little, just a little." Yun Shirshir's lips parted slightly, but she didn't react. Gong Jia glanced at Mu Yaja with a helpless gaze. This was the first time that Mu Yaja had seen him so helpless. She still refuses to eat. Mu Yaja asked in return, but it was an affirmative statement. Gong Jia nodded. She hasn't eaten for a few days and has only drunk a little water. Just the nutrient solution alone is far from enough to maintain her nutrition. As Gong Jia spoke, he glanced at Yun Shirshir's thin chin with heartache. These few days, she had actually starved so much that her oval face had grown. In the past, she was a standard beauty with an oval face. Her chin was very sharp, but she didn't have an oval face, which made her look beautiful and charming. She was thin to begin with, and now she had lost a lot of weight. Gong Jia was worried that if she continued to resist eating, it would turn into a physiological anorexia. The doctor came to the ward every day to do checkups. She hadn't eaten for a few days, so the doctor said worriedly that if she continued to resist eating for a long time, the most serious consequence would be a physiological anorexia. The most direct consequence would be a prolonged period of nutritional imbalance, and the fetus would stop developing. Then they would have to abort it. The doctor asked them to think of a way to persuade her to eat. She was only resisting eating psychologically, or perhaps she had been too agitated and was in a trance. Hence, she had no concept of eating at all. The unforeseen events of the past few days were really going to break her down. Gu Xingze had passed away and lost her sight. Hence, she had no concept of the passage of time at all. Usually, patients like her, who had suffered a major mental blow, would be resistant to anything or even reject it. She would reject eating, interacting with others, and being close to this world. Her heart was already shrouded in darkness. But when would this darkness be expelled? The one who started the trouble should be the one who untied it. But this person who started the trouble was no longer around. The doctor was also at a loss on what to do with her. The physical illness was easy to treat, but the mental illness was difficult to resolve. It wasn't that they hadn't tried psychological intervention before, but no matter how experienced a psychiatrist was, she didn't have any reaction when they sat in front of her. After she lost her eyes, she seemed to have lost her ability to perceive the world. She seemed to be unable to hear anything. The psychiatrist said that she had closed the door to the whole world. He locked himself in the fortress and built high walls, not allowing anyone to enter. The doctor told them to feed her as much as possible. Otherwise, the situation would not be optimistic. Whether it was Yu Yu, Xiao Yichen, Gong Jia, or even Mu Yaja, they were all locked out. Mu Yaja walked to the bedside and took over his work. He took the bowl and brought a spoonful of porridge to her mouth. Sure, eat a little, even if it's just one bite. Yun Sure stared at him in a daze, but her empty eyes were clearly not looking at him. It was as if she was looking through his body, and he did not know what she was looking at. He also did not know what she was thinking. A great sense of helplessness and panic filled his heart. Mu Yaja said in a hoarse voice, "Do you have to torture yourself like this before you're satisfied? Do you think Gu Xingze wants to see you like this?" Chapter 29:11. Do you want me to beg you? Mu Yaja bit his lips hard. His voice was mixed with pain and confusion. When had he ever shown such a helpless and hesitant look? I can't lose you. Sure. Eat a little, even if it's just a mouthful, okay? Gong Jia couldn't stand it anymore. He walked to Yun Shurshu's side and pinched her cheeks, forcing her to open her mouth. Mu Yaja glanced at him and didn't hesitate any longer. He steeled his heart and forced the porridge into her mouth with a spoon. This couldn't go on. Did you eat it? Gong Jia asked. Mu Yaja nodded. Yes, it went in. It was also difficult for these two grown men to put in so much effort to feed her. She wasn't in good health now. After a long period of fasting, her lips were abnormally chapped. This bowl of porridge had just been stewed this morning, so it was hot and hot. Mu Yaja didn't dare to feed her too much. He had to feed her in small mouthfuls. Yun Sure seemed to know how to cooperate, or maybe it was a subconscious reaction. She opened her mouth, slightly mechanically, and didn't spit out the porridge that was forced into her mouth. Instead, she chewed numbly and tried to swallow it. Gong Jia's eyes lit up. She ate it. Mu Yaja was worried that she would spit it out and looked at her in fear. It wasn't until she swallowed that mouthful of porridge that the huge rock hanging in his heart finally fell down heavily. Gong Jia urged again, "Continue." He also tried to let go of his hand. Yun Sure seemed to have regained some desire to eat. When Mu Yaja brought the porridge to her mouth again, she opened her mouth again and drank that mouthful of porridge. Slurp. The sound of her eating porridge was more beautiful than the most beautiful symphony in the world. Mu Yaja seemed to have received a great encouragement and fed her half a mouthful. Isn't it too bland? Gong Jia added some vegetables and carrots, and Mu Yaja was responsible for feeding them. However, she had only taken a few mouthfuls when her chest suddenly heaved up and down. Yun Sure had a pained expression on her face as she suddenly turned to face the trash can. With a wretched sound, she actually vomited out the few mouthfuls of porridge that she had just eaten. Muyaja looked at her in pain, but the vomiting became more and more intense. At first, it was still sticky porridge that had not been digested in time. Later, he vomited out stomach acid and bile. Gong Jie's heart ached as he watched her body curl up in pain. After she finished vomiting expressionlessly, she stared blankly at the trash can. No one knew what she was thinking about. "What are you looking at?" Gong Jie hurriedly went to call the doctor. Muyaja wiped her mouth with a hot towel and looked at her. She had lost a lot of weight in the past few days. She was so skinny that it was scary. He did not know how she would continue to lose weight. Her waist, which could not be held in one hand, was now pitifully thin. Sure, how can you be so weak?" Muyaja held her shoulders and asked painfully, "What should I do with you?" However, she seemed to have lost her ability to speak and did not answer him. When Gong Jie called the doctor over, the doctor first took a look at the food that was fed to her, then looked at the food that she had vomited out in the trash can and shook his head. "She hasn't eaten for so long and ate so much at once. I'm afraid she can't take it. Is it a lot?" Chapter 29:12. She didn't even eat half a bowl. You call that a lot? Her body functions are different from ordinary people. Ordinary people would be famished after 2 or 3 days of starvation, but she didn't feel anything at all. This means that she is anorexic. Although she has mild anorexia, it's still very difficult for her to eat half a bowl at once. She can only do it step by step. Muyaja sat on the sofa in silence, his face ashen. In the past few days, the news of Yun Shirshir attending Gu Xing's memorial service and being attacked by fans had spread like wildfire on the internet. Many fans were trying to figure out the relationship between Gu Xing's death and Yun Shirshir. There were also many paparazzi who wanted to sneak into the hospital and dig up more news. However, the Xingyu Financial Group had already sent a lot of manpower to guard the hospital tightly. Those despicable paparazzi couldn't get close at all. Although many reporters had given up, there were still some who were still stubbornly waiting. When Qin Zhou came to the hospital, Yun Shirshir had just fallen asleep. Muyaja was gently tucking her in. He walked to the door. The door of the ward was not closed. He knocked gently on the door. Muyaja looked over. When he saw him, he immediately walked to the door. "How is Shirshir?" Qinzhou asked about her, but he saw Muyaja's gloomy face. He was a meticulous person and probably knew that the situation was not optimistic. "She hasn't eaten for a few days. She doesn't eat. She refused to eat after coming back from the memorial service. She didn't feel anything when I called her name." Qinzhou frowned. Muyaja frowned anxiously. He suddenly thought of something and asked, "How is he?" Of course, Qinzhou knew who he was referring to. "He has been cremated." "Which cemetery is he buried in?" Qinzhou was stunned for a moment, and then said, "Jing, and cemetery." However, he only kept a portion of his ashes symbolically and set up a tombstone for his fans to remember him. The rest have been dealt with separately. "Dealt with separately?" "Yes." Qinzhou responded to his surprise with a smile. Xingzhe wrote in his diary that if he leaves this world, he hopes to be free and unrestrained. It was indeed too lonely to trap him in such a small tomb. "Yesterday, I climbed up Mo Ling Peak and personally scattered his ashes into the valley from the peak. The wind will definitely take him to where he wants to go." Although he had some reservations, this was Qinzhou's selfishness. He should have scattered Gu Xing's ashes into the free wind without exposing himself. However, he was afraid that if that happened, he wouldn't even have a person to mourn for when he missed him in the future. Therefore, a small portion of the ashes were buried in Jing and cemetery. It could also be considered a memento. Qin suddenly took out a memory disk from his bag and handed it to him. Mu Yaja took it and frowned suspiciously. What is this? I found it when I was sorting out Xingzhe's belongings. There's a video inside. Perhaps it's a memento for Shir. Qinzhou left. Mu Yaja looked at the memory disk in his hand and returned to the ward. He glanced at Yun Shir, who was lying on the bed, and then took a deep look at the memory disk in his hand. Finally, his gaze fell on the huge television screen in the ward. In the darkness, Yun Shir vaguely heard Gu Xingzhe's voice. Shir. Chapter 29:13. Shir. She did not sleep well. Gu Xingzhe's voice kept echoing in her ears like a gentle murmur. Yun Shir opened her eyes abruptly and sat up on the bed at once. Xingzhe. Shir. His voice was so real, as if he was right in front of her. However, Yun Shir could not see anything. She tried her best to open her eyes wide and kept groping with her hands. However, she could only hear the voice. She could not see or touch anything. For the past few days, she had not eaten or spoken. However, when she heard Xingzhe's voice, her heart, which was about to die, seemed to have revived. She was so nervous that it started beating. Xingzhe, are you there? Yun Shir was in a daze, but there was only one thought in her mind. Xingzhe. Xingzhe was beside her. She heard his usual gentle voice. She heard it. Xingzhe, Shir. He seemed to be smiling gently as he called her name. Yun Shir turned over and got out of bed. She could not see anything. She stumbled, and her knee accidentally hit the edge of something. However, she did not seem to feel pain at all. She reached out and groped around. Xingzhe, where are you? She followed the voice and groped around. She heard the voice getting closer and closer. She groped forward, but her fingertips suddenly touched the cold screen. Gu Xingzhe's voice entered her ears through the television. Shir. He kept calling her name as if he was not impatient at all. Yun Shir widened her eyes and leaned closer to the television screen. She heard that gentle voice say softly, "Perhaps in the future, I won't have the chance to call your name like this again." On the television screen, Gu Xingzhe sat in front of the camera. He turned his head slightly and smiled gently. Just like when they first met, his smile was as gentle as the spring breeze. It was even a little uneasy and shy. However, she could not see such a scene. The first time I heard this name, I thought it was a very nice name. It fits the person. Shir, I'm leaving. I need to go somewhere very far. Perhaps in this lifetime, we will never meet again. When Yun Shir heard this, she was caught off guard, and her tears flowed down. I used to trouble you, didn't I? I'm sorry. In the past, he couldn't help himself. I like you, but some feelings can't be forced. Xingzhe, from today onwards, I won't. The most regretful thing in my life is that I met you a little too late. I am not reconciled. I firmly believe that love comes first. I want to try hard, but I gradually found that we can't be together. It's not that I came too late. I love you, but you don't love me. Shir, I really love you very much. If I could, I would love you with my life. I hope that you won't be able to live without me. On the screen, Gu Xingzhe suddenly smiled and asked gently, "Why don't we make a promise? If there's an afterlife, let's meet again, okay?" Yun Shir looked up. Her eyes were hazy with tears. She bit her lip hard, and salty tears flowed into the gaps between her lips. Chapter 29:14. I'll definitely find you. Then we'll be together for the rest of our lives, okay? Yun Shir lost control of her tears. She broke down completely and cried bitterly. Gu Xingze, who was on the screen, seemed to have telepathy. He said frantically, "Don't cry." He said uneasily, "I'm most afraid of your tears. Don't cry, okay? We might still have the chance to meet in the future. After a few years, I'll have let go of this relationship. Maybe I'll appear in front of you with a new attitude. Actually, you don't have to be sad. I didn't know how to fight for it. Since I was young, I've never experienced what kinship and love are. I don't have any special feelings about marriage. At first, I didn't know if this hazy feeling I had for you was love or just a senior taking care of a junior. But later on, I realized that love can really be like a tornado, disrupting one's heartbeat. If I had known that this was love, I would have hugged you without hesitation. But it's all too late. Yun Shirshir covered her face and was sobbing uncontrollably. For the past few days, the dark and gloomy emotions that had accumulated in her chest seemed to have finally been released. Like a flash flood, it broke through the floodgates and became a disaster. No one knew that such an accident would happen. Moreover, no one knew that at this very moment, every word that he said to her, which seemed to be a casual farewell, was piercing her heart. Mu Yaja stood quietly beside the television and leaned against the wall. His handsome eyebrows were slightly furrowed as he watched everything quietly. He didn't stop her from crying. She had suppressed her emotions for so long. She needed to release them after all, but no one could make her release her emotions. Besides Gu Xingze, there was no one else. He was the one who was troubling her. In order to cure her, Mu Yaja could only think of this way. Mu Yaja glanced at the man on the screen. It was Gu Xingze's thin figure sitting in front of the camera. His face looked a little pale. Perhaps it was because of the damage to his body that made it difficult for him to maintain his best condition in front of her. He looked extremely weak. There was a thick shadow on his eyelids. Before he decided to leave the entertainment industry, he recorded this video as his final farewell to her. If this accident had not happened, he would probably be in a foreign country right now, and this video would be his last gift to her, given to her by Qin Zhou. However, who would have thought that the final farewell would be a final farewell? Yun Shirshir cried like a child in despair. Gu Xingze's voice was as light as a feather. "Thank you for appearing in my life, Shirshir." For 2 whole days, Yun Shirshir stayed in front of the TV, watching Gu Xingze's last video over and over again as if she had lost her soul. She didn't get tired of listening to it over and over again. She wanted to hear more of his voice. She missed him so much that she fell ill. She had so many things to say to him, but he couldn't hear her anymore. Her emotions were running rampant, and no one could cure her. She hugged the memory disk and listened to Gu Xingze's voice, as if she didn't know what fatigue was. Chapter 29:15. Gong Jia and Mu Yaja took turns to watch over her. Every night, Gong Jia and Mu Yaja would coax her again and again before she would obediently return to bed to rest. However, she still could not bear to turn off the television. She was afraid that if she turned it off, she would never hear his voice again. She knew that whether it was guilt or longing, it was time to let go. He was gone and no longer existed. These videos were also fake. They didn't exist. Gu Xingze was no longer there. However, every time she woke up and heard his voice, she would feel at ease. Everything seemed to have been bewitched. She still refused to eat. She would only occasionally drink some water and eat some fruits, even if it was just a little. Compared to her previous zombie-like state, everyone felt gratified and satisfied. At least, she was willing to try to eat. However, Yu was extremely worried. How long would this mental state last? Xiao Shui also came to the hospital to visit her once. Gong Jia did not let her in to disturb her, so she could only stand at the door and watch her from afar. Yun Shirshir's mental state was not good. Therefore, not many people knew that she was hospitalized. Mu Yaja protected her very well. He did not let anyone disturb her, nor did he let anyone disturb her recuperation. Xiao Shui was her best friend. When she heard the news, she insisted on coming over to take a look. However, when she stood at the door and saw her in a daze in front of the television from afar, her heart ached so much that tears streamed down her face. How did she become like this? Xiao Shui was extremely heartbroken. Has she been refusing to eat? Yu nodded painfully. Mommy has been refusing to eat. She can only rely on the nutrient solution to maintain her energy. Xiao Shui gritted her teeth. She was extremely upset. Gong Jie stood at the balcony, feeling extremely depressed. He turned around and glanced at Yun Shirshir. He sighed heavily, looking at her haggard appearance. Gong Jie's heart was about to bleed. At this moment, the doctor suddenly came into the ward. When Mu Yaja saw him, he stood up and walked towards him. What's the situation? Mr. Mu, why don't you take your wife for a detailed prenatal checkup? His sudden words reminded Mu Yaja that it was time for a prenatal checkup. He returned to the ward, held Yun Shirshir's shoulder, and asked gently, Shirshir, I'll take you for a checkup, okay? It's been so long. I wonder how the little fellow is doing. The doctor said that we have to do regular checkups. Yun Shirshir nodded in confusion. The nurse pushed the wheelchair over. Mu Yaja carried her onto the wheelchair and pushed her to do a checkup. After half a day, all kinds of examinations were done. Mu Yaja pushed Yun Shirshir to the doctor's office. The doctor was looking at the ultrasound report. At 9 weeks of pregnancy, the fetus has grown to 15 centimeters. The head of the fetus is larger than the body of the fetus, and the various parts are clearer. The head has begun to calcify, and the placenta has begun to develop. The ultrasound shows that the fetal sac almost fills the uterine cavity. The outline of the fetus is clearer, and the placenta is beginning to appear. After the doctor finished speaking, he said, Sai, this is really troublesome. If she refuses to eat for a long time, it might affect the development of the fetus. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Chapter 29:16. Yun Shirshir's eyes, which were initially emotionless, flickered a little when she heard this. Her eyes finally regained some focus. How's the little guy now? The little guy is very strong, and there's nothing unusual. However, if this goes on, it will definitely have many adverse effects on her body and the child. The doctor paused for a moment and said, even if the child survives in the mother's body, its innate resistance will be weaker after birth. If the mother's mood changes drastically during pregnancy, it will easily cause the child's personality to become sensitive. But I'm worried that if this goes on, the fetus will stop developing and might even have a miscarriage. Miscarriage? Mu Yaja's expression was tense. Isn't there a nutrient solution? This doesn't constitute sufficient nutrition at all. Moreover, emotional fluctuations are also a huge factor. The doctor placed the beeskin film on the backlight. He pointed at a very small ball in the film and said to him, This is the fetus. It's developing normally and is very strong. A normal little guy won't be able to last until this time. Mu Yaja stared at the small ball and pursed his lips. His eyes couldn't help but redden. That was his child. Who knew? It might be a beautiful little princess. He had always wanted to have a daughter with her. However, now that this child had fallen from the sky, he felt that this was probably the most beautiful gift that God had given him. But why was it that when he wanted to protect her, he felt a great sense of powerlessness? Mu Yaja suddenly turned around and leaned over slightly. He held her shoulders and asked carefully, Shirshir, did you hear that? Did you hear that? If you don't eat properly and don't rest normally, and keep torturing yourself like this. The child will die sooner or later. Yun Shirshir suddenly widened her eyes, and her pupils contracted violently. She looked at him, but could only see a barren land. The child, the little guy in your stomach, 9 weeks, she's still so small. Still so small. She's been developing strongly, but his heart ached as he pulled her into his embrace. Over the past few days, he had been suffering as well, for her, and even more for the child in her stomach. How could he not be on tenterhooks? At every moment, he was in fear. Enough. Was that enough? Even if it's a punishment, shouldn't it stop now? A hot teardrop fell onto her cheek. Muyaja hugged her back neck. For the first time in his life, a man who had always been proud and aloof shed tears in front of her. Stop torturing yourself, okay? You can torture me or punish me. Stop torturing yourself. He choked with sobs and said, Sure, I love you so much. And I also love this little guy in your belly. Don't torture yourself anymore. Look at me, look at me. He held her face and forced her to look at him. It doesn't matter how you punish me. The child is innocent. Please don't punish her, okay? His voice was hoarse and desperate for her response. What he got in return was a teardrop falling from her eyes. Muyaja hugged her tightly. I can't lose you, and I can't lose her. I don't know what to do with you. Wake up, he begged her uncontrollably. He begged her to wake up, begged her to open her eyes and look at the fetus in the film. Chapter 29:17. Muyaja's heart almost broke when he saw the tiny ball. Yun Shirshir's heart was in a mess. Back then, when she was pregnant with her first child, she was very anxious because she was worried about her family and her father. She was distracted and uneasy all day. Therefore, her emotions were fluctuating throughout the pregnancy. Although she was well nourished, it was precisely because of her emotions that more or less affected the development of the fetus. As a result, she was born prematurely in August. You almost died when he was born, although he was pulled back from the brink of death through emergency treatment. When he grew up, his physical fitness was still quite different from that of a normal child. He was weak and sickly, and he had a sensitive personality. She owed him a lot. However, this child came too suddenly. She was caught off guard and was unprepared. Mu Yaja carried her back to the ward. Xiao Shui had already left. Gong Jia immediately rushed over and asked, How's the situation? Mu Yaja did not speak. He only quietly carried her to the bed, pulled the blanket over her, and sat silently by the side. Gong Jia frowned and looked at him, then at Yun Shirshir, who was on the bed, and clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, Yun Shirshir suddenly sat up on the bed. The rustling sound startled them. Mu Yaja and Gong Jia were shocked and turned to look at her. They saw her sitting on the bed and leaning gently against the back of the bed. Compared to her previous wooden expression, her eyes had finally regained some focus. She glanced at them indifferently. Her eyes were dull, and there was a hint of embarrassment on her face. Then she said in a deep voice, I want to eat something. Mu Yaja was stunned. He did not expect her to make such a request. Gong Jia, on the other hand, was the first to react. He stood up suddenly, his eyes lit up as he walked over and asked, What do you want to eat? Porridge or rice is good. Meat and vegetables should be balanced. Don't have too much oil. Because of her pregnancy reaction, she could not eat anything with too much oil. After not eating for a long time, her body seemed to have gotten used to it. Therefore, she was especially resistant to eating. She didn't seem to know that she was hungry, nor did she feel anything. She wasn't deliberately torturing herself, and she had no desire to eat at all. However, on the way back from the doctor's office, The image of the developing fetus on the ultrasound film flashed through her mind repeatedly when she was pregnant with Yu and Xiao Chen a few years ago. She saw it on the film. It was so small, curled up into a ball. She couldn't even see its features clearly. This was her child. It was their child. Now, the child in her belly should also be that small. He rarely shed tears, but when he heard the doctor say that the fetus was in bad condition, he suddenly lost his composure. He held her shoulders, his heart aching as he begged her to wake up and stop torturing herself. In the end, she was touched. She wanted to keep the child. Therefore, even though she had no appetite, she still took the initiative to ask for food. Mu Yaja's eyes, which were originally dark and gloomy, finally lit up. Gong Jia immediately rushed out of the ward with the cold porridge. When he reached the boiling room, there was still a queue in front of the microwave. How could he have the patience to wait? He rushed to the front and occupied the microwave without any explanation. When the porridge was heated, he brought it back to the ward and presented it to her. Chapter 29:18. Gong Jia said softly, "Sister, the porridge is ready. I didn't heat it up for too long, so it's not hot. You can eat it directly." Yun Shusher reacted. Her hands fumbled around until she found the bowl of porridge. She held it gently. Mu Yaja immediately reached out to take the bowl of porridge from her hands, wanting to feed her. "I'll feed you, okay?" "I'll feed you." Yun Shusher immediately came back to her senses and said quietly, "It's okay. I can drink it myself." Mu Yaja frowned. "Your eyes aren't very good." Yun Shusher smiled slightly and immediately said, "I'm not as weak as you think. I just can't see clearly. I can still recognize things that are closer to me." With that said, she held the bowl with one hand and the spoon with the other. She scooped up a mouthful of porridge and brought it to her mouth. She blew on it gently before taking a bite. It wasn't hot, but it was very warm. However, she didn't have much of an appetite. In fact, she was still repulsed by food. But at the thought of the child in her stomach, she resisted the discomfort and took another big bite. Mu Yaja and Gong Jia looked at her nervously and asked cautiously, "Is there anything else you want to eat?" Yun Shusher opened her eyes blankly. Hearing this, she shook her head and said, "I don't have anything in particular that I want to eat." She only ate because she wanted to protect the baby. She had listened to everything the doctor said. If she didn't eat, she was worried that it would affect the baby in her stomach, especially when the doctor said that if she continued like this, it would definitely affect the development of the baby in her stomach. Then it might stop developing and become a stillborn. In the end, she could only have an artificial abortion. Her current bodily functions were being supplemented by sacrificing her mother's own nutrients. If this went on, it would be difficult for her child to survive. Hearing this, her heart seemed to clench fiercely in an instant. She had been in a daze earlier and hadn't cared about the child in her stomach. But now that she heard that the child in her stomach was in danger, she immediately regained her senses. No, she couldn't let herself go anymore. At that moment, she seemed to recall Yu Yu's appearance when he was born. He was lying in the nursery box, small and wrinkled. His entire body was red, and his two little hands were curled together tightly. For the first time in this world, this little guy seemed to be very nervous. He only knew how to open his little mouth and cry. Why is she crying so much? She was a little curious. As she thought about it, she gently reached out her hand. The little guy immediately reached out and held her hand tightly. His strength was not great, but his grip was very tight. Perhaps it was due to telepathy, but the little fellow's eyes were tightly shut. He was originally crying nonstop, but the moment he held her hand, he actually stopped crying. Why is it so small? Yun Shirshir looked at it carefully with tears in her eyes. It was said that when he was born, he was less than 2,500 grams. It was simply too small. At that time, tears fell from her eyes. She sighed silently in her heart. The most miraculous thing in this world was becoming a mother for the first time. She couldn't imagine how this little guy came out of her stomach. She also didn't know how these two little guys got along in her stomach for the past 8 months. Didn't they fight? Chapter 29:19. At that time, she was immediately amused by her own conjecture. As she laughed, tears fell uncontrollably from her eyes. The nurse said that it was really not easy to save the child. God knew that if she had not taken a second look at him, she would have missed the chance to save him. That one look gave the mother and son a chance to be reunited. What exactly was motherhood? It was when she saw this little guy that she wanted to give everything she had. She could not wait to present the most beautiful thing in the world to him. She was grateful for God's blessing, and thus named him Yun Tianyu. God bless, God bless, God bless. Returning to her senses from her thoughts, Yun Shirshir gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She gritted her teeth and drank a mouthful of porridge. It was dull and tasteless. It was like chewing wax. She even had an inexplicable feeling of nausea. Muyaja prepared some side dishes for her. He gently said, "Take your time. Don't eat so quickly. You haven't eaten for so long. If you eat too quickly, it will hurt your stomach." Okay. Yun Shirshir lowered her head as she ate the porridge. Her other hand was tightly clenched. "I'm sorry." She swallowed the food in her mouth and mumbled softly, "Previously, I made you guys worry. From now on, I'll eat properly." Muyaja was stunned. His lips could not help but curve into a gratified smile. Gong Jie looked at her with great relief. His tightly clenched heart finally relaxed slightly. Yun Shirshir suddenly smiled and choked out, I'll be fine." Motherhood was really a magical thing. Yun Shirshir began to eat properly and sleep well. At night, she went to bed very early. In the morning, she would even leave the ward to take a walk in the hospital's back garden, accompanied by Muyaja and Gong Jie. It had been too long since she left the bed to walk properly. The doctor said that lying in bed for a long time was not a good thing for the fetus. She also needed to move around properly. Every morning, before going to work, Muyaja would accompany her for a half-hour stroll. After that, he would settle her down and watch her finish her breakfast before going to the company with peace of mind. Every afternoon, he would try his best to arrange everything. At 3 o'clock, he would get off work early and come to the hospital to accompany her. Gong Jie, on the other hand, pushed aside all the matters in his hands and handed them over to others to handle. He stayed by her side to accompany her. He had always been an impatient person, but he had always been unconditionally patient with her. Yun Shirshir's mental state also gradually improved. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were also very obedient and took good care of themselves. After school, they would come to the hospital and accompany her while doing their homework. Yu Yu's homework was usually done in school. Xiao Yichen, on the other hand, had to look at a pile of homework every day and suffered greatly for half a day. Every time this happened, Yu Yu and Gong Jie would accompany Yun Shirshir for a walk, leaving Xiao Yichen alone in the ward to break down. Gong Jie was especially excited that she was pregnant. She didn't know what was going on, but this whole family seemed to have a lot of expectations for the little guy in her belly. It'll be great if it's a girl. Gong Jie also liked girls. He imagined that if she gave birth to a little princess, he would definitely dote on this niece to the bone. Chapter 29:20. The girl would definitely be very adorable, right? When the time came, He would definitely buy her many pink princess dresses in order to take good care of her. Gong Jie even went out of his way to learn a lot about pregnancy. You even mocked him for this. Imagine a person who was almost 9 meters tall, reading books about pregnancy for a few hours every day. When Mu Yaja discovered him secretly reading such books, the father and son reacted the same way and even mocked him mercilessly. Gong Jie was indignant. What do you know? I'm reading these books so that I can take better care of pregnant women. Mu Yaja did not think much of it. However, he did not read the books for nothing. Mu Yaja saw that the books seemed to be useful to him. At the very least, he had learned a lot about pregnancy. Hence, he also secretly bought a few books and read them. Later on, Gong Jie found out that he was also secretly learning about pregnancy and even mocked him mercilessly. When the two men were not busy with their careers, when Yun Shirshir was resting, they would each hold a book about pregnancy and read it with relish. Taking care of a pregnant woman was not an easy task. There was a period of time when her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. She was especially sleepy during the day and would often fall asleep not long after she finished eating. She would often be startled awake by retching. She would hold onto the trash can and retch for a long time, but nothing would come out. At night, she would suffer from insomnia. Then, in the middle of the night, she would have a craving for something to eat. Sometimes it would be apples, sometimes it would be sour plums, biscuits, bread. Hence, whenever this happened, the two men, Mu Yaja and Gong Jie, with sleepy eyes would go to the streets to look for food for her. Pregnant women seemed to have a special liking for sour fruits. When she was pregnant with Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, the Mu family had specially assigned people to take care of them. From the beginning, everything was done properly. Hence, her pregnancy symptoms did not seem to be particularly obvious. However, when she was pregnant with her second child, her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. One night, she had a craving for cherries. Mu Yaja spent more than 2 hours driving and almost flipping through half of the city before he finally found a 24-hour fresh produce supermarket and bought the cherries she wanted to eat. When she came back with the cherries, Mu Yaja washed them for her and brought them to her. Yun Shirshir was extremely touched. After calming down to nurture the fetus, the days passed by very leisurely. She didn't have to think about acting every day and night like before. After she calmed down, she could sleep soundly every day until she woke up naturally. After waking up, she would eat breakfast and take a stroll in the back garden. When she felt bored in the ward, Gong Jie would silently watch over her. Sometimes she would turn on the TV. Even if she couldn't see clearly, she could still hear the sound from the TV. She no longer felt so lonely. Gu Xing's death was quickly suppressed by Qin Zhou through various channels. At this time, Qin Zhou's true methods were revealed. During the memorial service, Yun Shirshir and Gu Xing's fans got into an argument. After that, nothing else happened. After that, there was no news at all. Chapter 29-21. It was actually very easy to suppress a hot topic. The reason why many news articles were so popular was because the media kept chasing them and paying attention to them. For example, Gu Xing's memorial service was covered all over the internet, so naturally it was very popular. When all the media stopped paying attention to this matter, the popularity would die down very quickly. Other than Gu Xing's hardcore fans, the public's interest in this matter was limited. If the media did not report it, it would naturally be forgotten very quickly. Qin Zhou felt that the best way to respect Xingze was to give him some peace and quiet. After spending a lot of money to bribe various media outlets, all the first-tier media outlets seemed to have collectively lost their memories and finally stopped paying attention to this matter. Soon, the entertainment industry returned to peace and quiet. The media no longer paid attention to this matter. Although there were still many fans who were extremely persistent, it was difficult to stir up a storm. On the internet, the popularity of Gu Xingze continued to fade. On the television, all the programs and advertisements related to him were immediately taken down. During this period, Extreme Youth was also ordered to stop promoting. Qin Zhou hoped that the public would forget about Gu Xingze's death as soon as possible, so as to minimize the harm to others, especially Yun Shirshir. Almost everyone thought that Gu Xingze's death was related to her. Even Yun Shirshir herself thought that she was the culprit behind Gu Xingze's death. But Qin Zhou did not think so. Just like in the video, Gu Xingze said to Yun Shirshir, "I am willing to love you with my life." Although this love was indeed a little heavy, perhaps at that time, he did not think so much at all. It was just his first subconscious reaction to protect her. His most selfish thought was that he hoped that she could retain a memory of him in her heart, even if it was just for a second. But he really did not know that it would bring about an unforgettable memory. He did not want to. Lethal Beauty was nearing its finale. Qin Yuyan's ending caused a lot of sighs from the audience. The role of Qin Yuyan was perfectly interpreted by Yun Shirshir. Even Gu Xiaoyang couldn't imagine that a newbie could understand the role so well and perform it with such superb acting skills. In the entire series, she was probably the most tragic character, but also the most realistic one. Qin Changle, the female lead played by Lin Ji, had a clear distinction between love and hate. Although she had all the characteristics of a female lead in a period drama, the character of Qin Yuyan portrayed the selfishness of human nature to the extreme, becoming a demon for love, becoming a fool for love. She had changed from an innocent and harmless young girl to someone who, for the sake of love, had disregarded her own safety and schemed against everything. In the end, she had ended up in a miserable state. Before she died, she cried to the male lead played by Hua Jin, "Do you know that for you I did everything I could to design this world for you? But in the end, I realized that the biggest mistake I made was, I fell in love with you. You hate my viciousness, but how could I not hate your heartlessness? But there was no other way. There was no other way. Who asked me to do everything just to get a glance from you, even if it was just a glance." His hoarse cries caused countless audience members to shed tears. A pitiful and hateful character, but more realistic. The selfishness of love and hate was portrayed to the extreme by Yun Shirshir. Chapter 29-22. Yun Shirshir's acting skills were enthusiastically recognized by the audience. The image she created was too vivid, leaving a deep impression in people's minds. Many new fans who liked her because of Lethal Beauty dug out her humble appearance when she usually went on variety shows. Her gentle and unpretentious personality, as well as her occasionally funny side, made the fans even more fond of this actress with superb acting skills. Hua Jin had flown to Paris because he needed to take a fashion photo shoot. When he returned, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit. He rejected some of the less important jobs and stayed at the hospital to watch over her when he was free. Soon, the doctor also came up with a few plans. Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir came from the hospital to protect the fetus. So the doctor came up with two plans for her. One is to do a cornea transplant first. Recently, there was a cornea donor from Guang City. It was the cornea of a 22-year-old girl. However, if you do the surgery during pregnancy, you will have to bear a lot of risk. However, we will have stricter control of the drugs. However, we can't completely rule out any adverse effects on the fetus. However, there's a risk. Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir looked at each other. The doctor looked at their expressions and knew that they could not accept this plan. Thus, he said, "The second plan is to give up on this donor and wait until after the delivery. After the birth, when the vitality is restored, we can look for a suitable donor. However, this cycle is very long. With the continuous deterioration of her eyesight, it might cause a lot of trouble in her life. After all, if a person who had always been healthy lost their eyesight overnight, their life would be bound, and it would be difficult for them to return to the normal track. And a cornea donor was something that could only be found by chance. It was luck and opportunity to meet one. If they missed it, they might have to wait for a few more years. In these few years, there would be too many variables. Mu Yaja frowned and said worriedly, "We were going to hold a wedding. Will this situation affect the wedding?" The doctor said sincerely, "My suggestion is not to rush to hold the wedding." When Yun Shirshir heard this, her expression suddenly became a little lonely. The wedding that she had been looking forward to was going to be delayed indefinitely because of this matter. She pursed her lips in grievance, looking extremely lonely. After returning from the doctor's office, she had been leaning against the bed with a gloomy expression. Their expectations for the wedding were suddenly crushed by the cruel reality, and nothing was left. Gong Jia saw that she was a little unhappy the moment she came back, so he looked at Mu Yaja suspiciously. "What happened?" "The wedding may have to be postponed," Mu Yaja said as he walked to the bed and sat down. He looked at her and asked, "Are you unhappy?" Yun Shirshir shook her head. "No." However, even though he said that he didn't, the loneliness in his eyes was so obvious that it was about to burst out. "You're saying that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking." Mu Yaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, "Don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you." Yun Shirshir was slightly stunned. Chapter 29-23. You may say that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking. Mu Yaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He gently rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, "Don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you." Yun Shirshir was slightly stunned. Ever since she got pregnant and stayed in the hospital, her pregnancy symptoms slowly followed. Even the anxiety and emotional changes that were unique to pregnant women were reflected in her body. How terrifying was it for a normal person to be blind? In the past, she felt that things that could be done naturally had become extremely difficult. Usually when she drank water, she could pick up the teacup. But now, even lying in bed and watching TV for a while had become an extravagant hope. It was common for her to knock things over. Once, she accidentally broke a vase that Yu had given her. She once complained that the smell of disinfectant was the most common in the ward, and it gave her a headache. Hence, Yu specially ran to the florist, chose a vase, put a few fresh flowers in it, and placed it on the windowsill. Realizing that the vase had been knocked over, Yun Shirshir hurriedly reached for the corner, and her hand was covered in blood. She had knocked over the vase that Yu had given her. She was afraid that Yu would feel sorry for her. When Gong Jia walked in, he saw Yun Shirshir sitting by the bed. Her hospital gown was stained with blood, and she looked a little disheveled. He rushed over and grabbed her hand. "Why is there so much blood?" "Xiao Jia, I just wanted to go to the washroom," she said in frustration. "I was groping along the wall and accidentally broke the vase. What should I do? I don't even seem to be able to do the most basic things." Gong Jia laughed and said, "Didn't I send a nurse for you?" "She went to eat. Didn't you ring the bell?" "I wanted to try and see if I could do it myself. After all, I'm not used to having someone accompany me to the washroom." She could not even take care of herself. Lying in bed every day, she had no choice but to ask for help even if she needed to solve her physiological needs. He couldn't see. His vision was close to blindness. Everything in front of him was foggy. She was uneasy about the future. When she thought about how she wouldn't even be able to see her own flesh and blood on the day she gave birth, she felt regret and heartache. As a result, he became extremely anxious and even lost his temper for no reason. Fortunately, Mu Yaja and Gong Jia were unconditionally tolerant of her anxious temper. Even if she was angry, anxious, or even crying because of a trivial matter, Mu Yaja could still patiently comfort her until she calmed down. Gong Jia replied, "It's only temporary that you can't see. Right now, it's mainly for the little guy in your belly. The doctor said that it's too risky to perform the surgery now. We're not willing to take the risk. I understand. There will be more opportunities in the future." "What if there's no such opportunity?" Gong Jia replied immediately, "That's impossible. There is no such assumption. Sister, don't let your imagination run wild. You're just too idle every day. With nothing to do, it's easy for your imagination to run wild. Actually, it's not as bad as you think." "I understand," Yun Shirshir immediately said. "Don't worry, I won't let my imagination run wild and make you guys worry." Chapter 29-24. There were many people in the hospital, and the ward was always dark, so it was difficult to get real peace and quiet. Hence, he discussed with the doctor and brought her back to Yunshanshi to recuperate. Yunshanshi was an excellent place with good feng shui and was very conducive to recuperation. It was originally built as a resort. After Yunshanshi was brought back to Yunshanshi, Gong Jia was finally relieved and decided to return to Hurricane. He had a lot of work on hand that was waiting for him to rush back to deal with. He was worried that his father would become suspicious if he stayed any longer. Gong Jia did not say much goodbye and took a private jet back to Hurricane's headquarters. Yun Shirshir began to recuperate. Of course, although she had more free time, she still found some things to do. For example, what should I name the little guy? At night, Yu and Xiaoi Chen were already asleep. Mu Yaja was reading his email when Yun Shirshir lay on the sofa and muttered to herself, "I have a headache coming up with a name." She was a little troubled. She had been thinking for a long time about the child's name, but she still could not think of a satisfactory one. Muyaja put down his laptop and walked to her side. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead lovingly. "You haven't even confirmed whether it's a boy or a girl, yet you're already in a hurry to think of a name. Aren't you a little too anxious? Because it's too boring." She muttered, "I'm at home every day with nothing to do, so I'm thinking about what to name the child after it's born." "Then you're in a hurry to come up with a name when you know the child's gender? What if you choose a boy's name and give birth to a girl? Then I'll think of a boy and a girl's name together." Mu Yaja laughed, but went along with her and asked, "Then do you want a girl or a boy?" Yun Shirshir laughed and said, "It's not like I can give birth to a boy just because I want a girl or a boy. This is something that can't be decided." "Then do you like a girl or a boy?" "I like both." Yun Shirshir said and asked him, "What about you?" "I hope to have a little princess." Mu Yaja was famous for being fond of daughters. Men had no resistance against daughters. It was said that daughters were the lovers of their fathers in their previous lives. These words were not false at all. Mu Yaja wholeheartedly hoped that he could have a little princess. He would definitely be overjoyed. By the way, I've always been curious about the meaning behind the name Xiaoi Chen. Yun Shirshir was a little curious. It couldn't have been randomly chosen, right? The name she gave you was meaningful. She was thankful to the heavens for saving her life despite having a near-death experience when she was born. Hence, she was named Yun Tianyu. Mu Yaja explained, the word means light. Chun was ranked 5th in the earthly branch and was a dragon. Put together, It means a handsome and beautiful person, rational and full of wisdom, a life of elegance, auspiciousness, success, and honor. Yun Shirshir was stunned when she heard that. She smiled and teased. Are you really majoring in finance? You seem to know a lot about these things. I did my homework when I came up with a name. You came up with this name? She was a little surprised. Yes, Grandpa wanted to come up with it himself, but I wasn't satisfied. Then what should I name the little guy in my stomach? Chapter 29-25. I've thought of many names, but I don't know what to choose. The art of naming a person was very profound. In this aspect, Yun Shirshir was very picky. A name was not just a simple symbol. She believed in this art. First of all, the name had to be pleasing to the ear and pleasant to the ear. A name that was unpleasant to the ear, no matter how meaningful it was, would not be liked. She also had to pay attention to the homophony. For example, Duziding and Yuling had good meanings, but the homophony made people not know whether to laugh or cry. There couldn't be too many strokes, or it would be troublesome to write. She also had to refer to the zodiac and the 8 characters. The older generation also had to pay attention to the 5 elements of yin and yang. Which ones did you think of? He couldn't help but be curious and wanted to hear her results. If it's a boy, I thought of a few names. Yun Shirshir paused and said, Mu Tianyi with the meaning of soaring in the sky and achieving great things. Mu Juanhao with the meaning of a gentleman's heroic spirit. It doesn't sound good. He expressed his opinion. There's more. Yun Shirshir listed many more names. In fact, the names she came up with were not only meaningful, but also pleasant to the ear. However, Muyaja didn't like it. Have you thought of a girl's name? Yun Shirshir said matter-of-factly. Of course. Such as Mu Jinghan Mu Yi Mu Yueyao Yueyao? Mu Yaja suddenly interrupted her. Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows in surprise and pouted. What's wrong with this name? He smiled. It's very pleasant to the ear. Hey, aren't you a little too biased? Yun Shirshir said with some disdain. You obviously like girls more. So why do girls' names sound pleasant to the ear? Such an evaluation is not fair at all. Who said so? He said seriously. Yueyao is a very pleasant name. Let's call it that. Yun Shirshir said unwillingly, what if it's not a girl? Whether it's a girl or not, it's my decision, not yours. You don't have to worry. Mu Yaja scratched her nose and said confidently, I think that when the little guy comes out, it will definitely be a girl. What? You make it sound like you and your daughter have telepathy. Yun Shirshir was a little jealous. If it's really a girl, I won't have a place in this family in the future. You only have eyes for your daughter. In the future, when father and daughter are united, won't my life be hard? Don't you have Yu and Xiao Chen? She had nothing to say. Aren't the 3 of you united? My daughter and I are of one mind. So what? So you're not allowed to do that. His reasoning was one after another. Good. You're right. You're an old sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Yun Shirshir seemed to have learned this from somewhere. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly hugged her tightly and said solemnly, Don't worry. You'll always be the most important person in my heart. No one else can compare to you. That's what you're saying now. When our daughter is born, it'll be hard to say. She felt sweet inside, but her words were unforgiving. In the future, when we have a daughter, who knows where my status will be? Muyaja said, Really? Thousands and tens of thousands of daughters can't compare to you. Thousands and tens of thousands? You'll have to be able to raise thousands and tens of thousands. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting me? Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her hands and leaned closer to her. There's no one that I can't raise. It'll just depend on whether you can afford to give birth to them. Let's not talk about other things. Just based on this weight, I can't give birth. Even an old sow can't give birth to so many. Chapter 29-26. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting my ability? Yaja suddenly grabbed her hand. Smiling deeply, he leaned closer to her and said suggestively, "There's no one I can't afford to raise. Let's see if you can afford to give birth to them." "I'm not a sow. I can't give birth to tens of thousands of them. Even an old sow can't give birth to that many," Yun Shirshir said angrily. "It's enough for you to have 3 buffoons at home." She patted his hand and said exasperatedly, "Stop fooling around. HM, let's think of names together. I've thought of so many names, but you haven't expressed your opinion yet." "Didn't I express my opinion?" With that, Yaja lowered his head and moved closer to her abdomen. He held her belly, which had yet to bulge, and smiled. "Wow, did you hear that? This is the name that Mommy gave you." Hey, Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Are you done fooling around? How do you know that it'll definitely be a daughter?" Yaja said solemnly, "Do you believe that it'll definitely be a little princess?" "I don't believe it." "Then let's bet." Yaja looked confident. Smiling, he said, "This is probably the telepathy between father and daughter." As he spoke, he looked lovingly at her lower abdomen. It was as if he could see the little fellow inside, through her belly. "Yueyao, isn't this name very nice? Daddy likes it too. Yueyao, you must be good in Mommy's stomach. Daddy loves you." Yun Shirshir couldn't see his face at this moment, but she could imagine that Yaja's gaze was fixed on her stomach. His face must be filled with tenderness. His eyes narrowed, and his handsome brows arched gently. She remembered that he looked especially good when he smiled. His thin lips curved, outlining a gentle arc like water, with shallow smiling dimples. He rarely smiled, and it was only when he was facing her that he would reveal a rare smile. However, his smile seemed to be able to melt even the coldest ice and snow in the world in a single night. Yun Shirshir suddenly smiled, contentedly. She felt that at this moment she was surrounded by happiness. She was a little overwhelmed. Yaja didn't notice the reaction on her face at all. Instead, he was focused on her stomach. After a while, he leaned forward and pressed his ear against her stomach, listening carefully. After a while, he started talking to himself in front of her stomach, as if he was communicating with the little fellow in her stomach. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She held back her laughter and didn't want to disturb him. Yaja suddenly raised his head and asked quizzically, "Can she hear what I said?" "Are you stupid?" Yun Shirshir couldn't help but say, "It's useless to listen to it now. At this time, there's no fetal movement." "Oh, is that so?" He furrowed his brows, looking disappointed. "I thought she could hear me in her stomach. She can't hear you. The child can't even understand what people are saying, let alone a fetus that hasn't developed yet." Yaja caressed her lower abdomen lovingly with a contented smile on his lips. His gaze never left her lower abdomen, as if there was a rare treasure hidden there. Wasn't it a rare treasure? He had even named it. He said gently, "Yueyao, you must be good and don't be naughty. Develop well and grow well. Daddy will wait for you." Chapter 29-27. Buffed, Yun Shirshir covered her mouth and snickered. "I already said that she can't hear you now. What are you talking to yourself for?" "What if she can hear me?" He raised his eyebrows disapprovingly and reiterated, "There's telepathy between father and daughter." "Okay, telepathy." She went along with him. Yaja gently caressed her belly as he fantasized. "If the daughter looks like you, what will she look like?" Forgive his limited imagination. The face he imagined was either a miniature version of Yun Shirshir or a combination of Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen's faces. It was very out of place. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she said, "I heard that daughters look more like their fathers." "Huh, there's such a saying?" "Of course. Haven't you heard of it?" Yun Shirshir said seriously, "It's said that sons look like their mothers, while daughters look like their fathers. Look, you look so much like me. It's also said that sons are closer to their mothers. Daughters, on the other hand, are closer to their fathers." Mu Yaja grabbed her face and scrutinized it before nodding. "Yu Yu and Ichendu look more like you. Their facial features are delicate, especially their eyes." After a pause, he said confidently, "Then my daughter will definitely be a beautiful girl when she grows up." Yun Shirshir laughed. "Narcissist, why are you so narcissistic?" "This is the truth," he said solemnly. "Daughters look like you? I can't imagine that." Yun Shirshir's mind went dark, and she could not think of any image. Mu Yaja also fell into a fantasy. His imagination was also a little lacking. In his mind, a baby girl's face covered his features. No matter how he looked at it, it felt out of place. Suddenly, he was shocked by the face that he imagined. She should be very pretty. He felt a little guilty. He did not know what his daughter would look like if she inherited his looks. Yun Shirshir thought about it carefully and said casually, "If it's a daughter, her eyes and nose will be like yours. She will be very beautiful." Actually, Yun Shirshir pondered for a moment and suddenly smiled with motherly gentleness. "I also hope that the little guy in my stomach is a girl." "Huh, you want a daughter too?" "Of course," Yun Shirshir said matter-of-factly. "They say that daughters are sweet. Yu Yu and little Ichen will definitely feel aggrieved if they hear this." Mu Yaja's heart ached for the two little guys for a few seconds. "If she's really my daughter, I'll definitely prepare a super big walk-in closet for her. Since she was young, I bought many beautiful princess dresses for her. Pink, white, black, and dressed her up like a little princess." However, Mu Yaja did not agree. "What do you mean by dressing up? Mu Yaja's daughter, will be born a princess." Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. Yes, she will be born a princess. Your Majesty." "It's the 10th week now." Mu Yaja ignored her and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her forehead gently and said expectantly, "In 2 weeks, it will be 3 months. In 8 months, she will come into this world. I must prepare well to welcome her." "How?" Yun Shirshir asked curiously. He said seriously, "It's time to prepare the nursery." Chapter 29-28. A nursery? Yun Shirshir slapped her forehead hard. "Oh no, I forgot. I haven't had time to prepare a nursery. This little guy came too suddenly, so I wasn't mentally prepared at all." She felt a little regretful. She couldn't see anything clearly now, so it was hard for her to give any suggestions. She also couldn't personally design a princess room. However, Mu Yaja said, "It's okay, I'll prepare it." Naturally, Mu Yaja was more than happy to do this. Even though preparing a nursery was an extremely tedious process, it was an extremely happy thing for him. Of course, this wasn't just for show. The next day, he held her hand and brought Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen to the counter. Yun Shirshir was wearing sunglasses, so it was a little difficult for her to walk. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen suggested that they hire a nanny to support her. However, Mu Yaja was worried about the servants. If they were careless and accidentally bumped into something, he would be the one who would be heartbroken. After they got out of the nanny van, Mu Yaja supported her. Yun Shirshir held his hand and carefully took a step forward. However, she seemed a little timid. She couldn't see anything, so every step she took was extremely careful. Just hold my hand. Mu Yaja held her hand tightly and said, "Follow me, don't be afraid." Yun Shirshir also held his hand tightly. In a situation where she couldn't see anything clearly and the whole world was dark, even if someone was holding her hand, she would still be subconsciously worried about what the road would be in front of her with every step she took. It was as if she was walking on the edge of a cliff, and she was on tenterhooks. It was difficult for ordinary people to understand this kind of uneasiness. However, ordinary people would still be worried even if they were held by someone with their eyes closed. Moreover, the person holding her wouldn't be able to notice even the smallest detail at all times. However, he said, "Follow me, don't be afraid." He wouldn't let her fall, bump, or touch anything. Yun Shirshir trusted him wholeheartedly, so she held his hand and followed his footsteps. Muyaja held her hand and led her to the baby and baby counter. Baby Q was the world's leading baby and baby counter. Yun Shanshir was their wedding home, but the nursery was only slightly renovated. It was empty, and even the wallpaper wasn't properly pasted. They started with the wallpaper selection. Yu and Xiaoi Chen also started browsing. The shop assistant brought over a thick stack of books. Mu Yaja flipped them page by page. They were all European designs, and there wasn't anything that caught his eye. "Girls should be pink, right?" Yun Shirshir said, "When I was young, I especially liked pink. If she's a daughter, she should take after me in this aspect." In every girl's heart, there was a princess dream. She imagined herself to be a princess in a fairy tale, waking up in a fairy tale style room every day. Opening her eyes, she would see a pink world and a big bed covered with pink bed curtains. She would enjoy the dreamlike world to her heart's content. Mu Yaja snapped his fingers and said, "Yes, pink. Girls all like pink." He didn't realize it at first. The shop assistant understood what he was hinting at and immediately brought over a stack of books. They were all pink wallpaper designs. Mu Yaja started flipping through them. Seriously. He was picky, and just the wallpaper alone took him a lot of effort. Chapter 2929. After choosing the wallpaper, the family started to choose the crib, toy box, wardrobe, and decorations. "Can I trust your taste?" Yun Shirshir was a little doubtful. She didn't know what the princess room would look like. Could it be it would be ugly? A man's taste was always hard to explain. She was going to cry if it turned out to be a mix-and-match trend. However, Muyaja was very confident in his taste. Yu approved of the effect of his decorations. Of course, Xiao Yichen's opinion was put aside. He didn't seem to know much about aesthetics. When asked, he said innocently, "As long as little sister likes it." Yu couldn't help but complain, "Little sister isn't born yet. How do you know if she likes it or not?" When Yun Shirshir heard this, she couldn't help but complain, "We haven't even confirmed whether it's a boy or a girl. How do you know it's going to be a little sister?" "Oh, you're right." Yu suddenly clenched her fists and said, "What if she gives birth to a little brother?" When Mu Yaja and Xiaoi Chen heard this, they were stunned for a few seconds. Yu said meekly, "I hope it's a little sister too, but what if it's not? Maybe things won't go according to our wishes." Mu Yaja and Xiao Yichen's expressions darkened. They seemed to have thought of this possibility as well, and there was a hint of melancholy in their eyes. When the time comes and it's a boy, living in a pink crib seems a little uncomfortable. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but add, "Impossible. Your genes are so strong. If you gave birth to 2 boys in a row, the chances of the third being a boy are very high," Yun Shirshir continued. Mu Yaja snorted coldly and said, "Impossible. It must be a girl. Anyway, we'll just decorate it according to the princess room." Yu suddenly pulled Xiao Yichen aside and whispered, "Mu Yichen, Daddy is so biased. if Mommy really gives birth to a little princess, won't we lose our place in Daddy's heart? I don't know about you, but as for me, Xiao Chen teared up. I don't seem to have any status. Yu pursed her lips. Really? Mu Yichen felt so wronged that he was about to cry. Daddy didn't put in so much effort to decorate my room when I was young. I've never had much of a presence in his heart. Daddy favors girls over boys. You came to a conclusion. Ugh. Xiao Yichen stroked his chin. However, I still hope that Mommy will give birth to a little princess. I've wanted a little sister for a long time. Yu added, me too. A little sister is so cute. She's so soft and adorable. I can even imagine her smiling at me. Her eyes will curve into crescents as if there are countless little stars in them. She's so beautiful. Little Yichen's heart was bursting with anticipation. The image of a cute little girl smiling innocently at him appeared in Yu's mind, and his heart almost melted at the thought. Thus, the two little guys reached a consensus. That was, it didn't matter if she fell out of favor in front of her daddy. It didn't matter if she lost her status. The most important thing was that they liked a little sister. Regardless of whether they lost Daddy's favor or not, having a little sister was more important. Is liking a daughter a hereditary trait? You thought about it seriously. If it were me, I would also like a daughter more. Chapter 29:30. Yu giggled, amused by him. Under the combined efforts of the father and son, the princess room was quickly decorated. The walnut flooring was redone, pink wall coverings, white solid wood crib, dreamy bed curtains, and a beautiful crystal chandelier. Everything was as luxurious as a castle. After the princess room was decorated, Mu Yaja held Yun Shirshir's hand and showed her around. Even though she couldn't see anything, Mu Yaja was extremely excited as he explained everything to her step by step. Yun Shirshir touched the wall with her hand and felt that the wall coverings had a very good texture. She couldn't help but ask, "What color is the wall coverings?" "It's pink, but it's not just a wall coverings. There's a piece of wallpaper with a picture of a pink unicorn." The pink unicorn was Luji Group's mascot. After Yu took over, he designed a new generation of mascots. Later on, it was printed as a label and printed on every toy package. Later on, this rainbow unicorn had its own name and became the symbol of Luji Group. The children loved this unique and cute little unicorn, and later on, it gave birth to countless products. You saw this picture on the wallpaper by chance and felt that it was very meaningful. Hence, he discussed with Mu Yaja and put up this side of the wallpaper. Yun Shirshir had to use her imagination to imagine the baby room that he had decorated. It seemed to be a little difficult, but seeing how excited the father and son were, she trusted their judgment for the time being. She originally thought that after decorating the princess room, Mu Yaja would stop. However, little did she know that she had yet to experience the crazy side of a certain man. One night, when Mu Yaja came back, he walked into the room and went to her bedside. She was resting when she heard him say mysteriously, "Shirshir, guess what I brought back today?" "What?" She was curious. She didn't know what he had brought back with him. He smiled and said casually, "I bought many dresses for my daughter." Yun Shirshir was stunned and at a loss. "Ah, skirt," Mu Yaja immediately ordered. Outside the door, the servants came in with stacks of dresses and placed them in front of her. Yun Shirshir couldn't see anything. She only felt that the clothes in front of her were piled up into a mountain. Ever since the naming incident, a certain man seemed to be especially enthusiastic about the little guy in her stomach. Wasn't it a little too extravagant to buy dozens of dresses all at once? "The child hasn't been born yet. Isn't it a little too early to buy clothes now?" she said hesitantly. Why is it so early? Mu Yaja said disapprovingly. The earlier you buy it, the earlier you prepare it. But children develop very quickly. If you buy so many pieces, the child might not be able to wear them in time. No, do you think I haven't considered that? He scratched the bridge of her nose lightly and said slowly, the dresses I bought are all different sizes. From the clothes she wears when she's born to the clothes she wears when she's 5 or 6 years old. I picked a few styles. 5 or 6 years old. Yun Shirshir was speechless. She'll have to wait 5 or 6 years before she can wear them. By then, the styles I picked now will be a little outdated. That won't happen. Chapter 29:31. My daughter will definitely be beautiful. Outdated clothes will definitely look good on her. A certain man seemed especially confident. His extremely confident words were completely different from his usual style of speaking. In the future, would this man evolve into a slave to his daughter? Yun Shirshir couldn't help but imagine it in her mind. In the image, Mu Yaja lovingly carried the tender little girl in his arms, coaxing her to eat, hugging her to sleep, and even when walking, he couldn't bear to put her down on the ground and let his daughter ride on his shoulders. She then imagined Mu Yaja carrying a chubby son with a bitter and vengeful look. Yun Shirshir's heart was beating like a drum. The little guy hadn't even been born yet, and he was already excitedly preparing this and that. If the baby was a boy, then not only would the princess's room be decorated for nothing, what would he do with the piles and piles of dresses that he had bought? It would be fine if the baby was a daughter, but if it turned out to be a son in the end, his heart would definitely be severely disappointed. He would definitely be very disappointed. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked curiously, let me ask you seriously, if the baby isn't a daughter and it's a son, will you still like it? Mu Yaja pondered for a moment and then said solemnly, of course, as long as it's our child, I'll like it. I see that you like daughters so much. When the time comes, you won't be begging me to give birth to another one, right? When Mu Yaja heard this, he hugged her and rubbed his face against hers intimately. What nonsense are you thinking about again? You're not a sow. If you don't want to give birth, I won't force you. A certain man seemed to have forgotten how this child came about. If he hadn't replaced her contraceptive pills with folic acid, Yun Shirshir wouldn't have fallen for it so coincidentally. Yun Shirshir was completely kept in the dark. She thought that the child had broken through all the obstacles and obstacles to get here. Little did she know that Mu Yaja had also tampered with it. Oh, by the way, we have to go for a prenatal checkup soon. Yun Shirshir gently touched her belly and complained, recently I seem to like sleeping a lot. My vomiting has slowly subsided, but I get hungry easily in the middle of the night. I want to eat something, but I don't know if I can eat it. Of course you can. Mu Yaja said, I've asked the doctor. He said that I can have some snacks. There are some biscuits and bread at home. When you are hungry, you can eat some biscuits. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but silently criticize her. If she ate and slept every day, would she lose control of her body shape after giving birth? She heard that many pregnant women lost their figures after giving birth. When she gave birth to Yu and Mu Yichen, she was only 18 years old. She was still young, so she maintained her figure very well. But now, she was in her 20s. No matter what, she was still a little worried about this. Mu Yaja glanced at her and couldn't help but make up a story. Why? Are you afraid that you'll gain weight if you eat too much? When Yun Shirshir heard this, she bit her lip in embarrassment. What if I lose my figure? It'll be a nightmare to gain 15 kilograms all of a sudden. It's okay. You're so thin now. Take advantage of your pregnancy and gain some weight. He felt that she was too thin. Chapter 29:32. Especially a while ago, when she didn't eat or drink, her nutrition couldn't keep up, and she lost a lot of weight. His heart ached terribly. In the end, she was still worried about whether she would gain weight. If I really eat until I become a big fat person, won't you despise me? The man said matter-of-factly, I can't do anything about it. We're already an old married couple. Would I still care about whether you're fat or not? Yun Shirshir was quite taken aback. All right, I'm just teasing you. If you gain weight, I won't despise you. You're lying. Mu Yaja suddenly thought of something and said to her, soon we'll have to prepare for a prenatal checkup. Okay. At the mention of prenatal checkup, Yun Shirshir asked curiously, I heard that the gender of the fetus can be determined at 16 weeks. Okay, but isn't the law against it? To me, this law doesn't apply. Why do you ask? Yun Shirshir said, why don't we do a gender test? However, Muyaja said, it's better to have fewer ultrasounds. There's no need to rush the test. When Yun Shirshir was 4 months pregnant, Muyaja took her for a prenatal checkup. After the checkup, all the indicators were very good. Over the past month, under Muyaja's meticulous care, her body had recovered a lot. The doctor who did the prenatal checkup for her was a female doctor. In the office, she looked at the various data reports while sizing up the man beside Yun Shirshir. She couldn't help but say enviously, Mrs. Mu, you're so lucky. Every time you do a prenatal checkup, President Mu follows you around and does it himself. You're so lucky to have such a considerate and gentle husband who dotes on you so much. Yun Shirshir smiled and held his hand tightly. She pursed her lips and said, he's even more nervous than I am when I'm pregnant. I wasn't feeling well recently, so he was afraid that something would happen to me. Mu Yaja stroked her hair lovingly and asked slowly, is the fetus healthy? Chairman Mu, don't worry. The fetus is very healthy. As the doctor spoke, he suddenly smiled mysteriously and asked, I heard from young Madam Mu that Chairman Mu has already started preparing the nursery. Yes, it's ready. Princess room? The doctor smiled. Yun Shirshir also smiled and said, it's not just a princess room. We even bought a bunch of clothes and hung them in the wardrobe, waiting for the baby to wear them when he's born. However, all the clothes he had prepared were for girls. I laughed at him and said, what if we have a boy? What should we do? Are you going to let your son wear all these dresses? The doctor was stunned for a moment and did not know whether to laugh or cry. So, Chairman Mu likes daughters. Yes, he was looking forward to the baby in my stomach being a girl. He likes girls. He likes them so much. Young madam, what about you? Do you like daughters too? Of course. I like my daughter very much, but not as much as him. However, the doctor said, generally speaking, a father would prefer a daughter more. She's the apple of my eye. We still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Chapter 2933. Pausing for a moment, the doctor continued, but now it seems like this is probably telepathy. It's fate. Yun Shirshir smiled. Then, she seemed to have realized something. She raised her eyebrows and asked suspiciously, what did you say? Mu Yaja, who was behind her, also looked stunned. What do you mean? The doctor smiled and said, Chairman Mu, Madam Mu, congratulations. You have a little princess in your tummy. Chairman Mu, you have a daughter. Mu Yaja was in a daze for a long while before he finally regained his senses. He couldn't care less about being reserved. He looked at Yun Shirshir in surprise and asked again, it's really a girl? Yes. The ultrasound confirmed that it's a girl. The accuracy of the ultrasound is very high. Generally speaking, it can be 100% confirmed. Chairman Mu, congratulations. The princess room was prepared correctly. Muyaja's nervous expression finally relaxed. His eyebrows were raised high in excitement. He was so happy that he didn't know what to do. He squatted down and looked at Yun Shirshir. Holding her shoulders, he was so happy that he almost lost control of his emotions. Shirshir, we have a daughter. Yes, yes. Yun Shirshir was happy for him, too. Even though she could not see the expression on his face, she could imagine how happy he was just by hearing the slight tremble in his voice due to the sudden happiness he was feeling right now. Muyaja was so happy that he couldn't control himself. He hugged her and lifted her into his arms. Ignoring the fact that there were outsiders around, he carried her and spun her around a few times. Yun Shirshir was so shocked that she hugged his shoulders nervously. She said reproachfully, "You scared me. Shirshir, I'm so happy. I can't believe that this is real." Muyaja hugged the back of her head. His thin lips couldn't help but curve into a gentle smile. He thought about how soon the child would be born, and he would be able to carry a little princess. His mood was like a hydrogen balloon that wanted to fly into the sky. "Put me down." She was bashful and embarrassed as she lightly punched his shoulder. "It's so ugly. At least be a little more reserved." The doctor laughed and said, "I've been in the obstetrics and gynecology department for so many years, and I've seen many such scenes. Many new stay-at-home fathers can't help themselves. Young madam, you don't have to feel embarrassed." Muyaja put her down and couldn't help but hug her, kissing her again and again. "Shirshir, you've worked hard. All right, all right. I know you're happy." She paused for a moment and said playfully, "Congratulations, Mr. Mu. You're going to be a father again. And this time it's a daughter." He has both a son and a daughter, which is enough to be called good. As she spoke, she reached out her hand and gently caressed his face. Her fingertips accidentally touched his eyelids and touched a trace of wetness. She couldn't help but be startled, and her heart twitched. Thank you for pulling yourself together for me and our child." His throat actually felt like it was choked up. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes in a daze. However, she heard him say in a low voice, "Did you know? I almost thought that I was going to lose you." As Muyaja spoke, he held her hand and gently kissed her fingertips. Because of this great happiness and excitement, his eyes couldn't help but redden. There was the joy of regaining what he had lost, the happiness of surviving a disaster. Hearing his extremely tense voice, Yun Shirshir's eyes also welled up with tears. Chapter 2934. During the period when Gu Xingzi left her, she was immersed in immense guilt and pain, so much so that she neglected his feelings for a while. At that time, she was in a muddle-headed state. She guarded the pain in her heart day and night, constantly licking her wound. Little did she know that he was also carefully protecting her. Every time she woke up from a nightmare, he was always by her bedside, busy comforting her, wiping away her cold sweat, and coaxing her to sleep. When she was at her lowest point, he was holding the bowl, coaxing her over and over again, lying to her and coaxing her to eat. She could not see how nervous he was, but sometimes when she was half awake, she could feel that he was by her bedside, gently holding her hand, unwilling to let go. She did not know about his suffering, much less his pain. He was not good with words, much less expressing himself. Her man was an extremely introverted man. His emotions were hidden deep in his heart. During that period of time, he was also suffering. He did not know how to share her pain, nor did he know how to bring her out of that shadow. He was a man who got jealous easily. In the past, she could not even mention Gu Xingzi's name. But at that time, she was watching Gu Xingzi's videotape and sat there in a daze for the whole afternoon. He watched from the side, feeling helpless and heartbroken. He whispered in her ear countless times, Sure, you still have me. Gu Xingze is no longer around, but you still have me. I can't lose you. Wake up, okay? Can you let yourself go, please? Let yourself go. Don't torture yourself anymore. If you get better, I'll accept any price. He held her shoulders more than once and said word by word, Sure, Gu Xingze is not the only one who is willing to protect you with his life. There's me too. I can do it too. Don't I love you with my life too? But every time he saw her indifference, he could do nothing but hold her in his arms with heartache. She often woke up from nightmares, and when she woke up, she would sit there motionless, tears constantly falling. He hurriedly wiped her tears and endured the bitterness in his heart. God knows, when he saw her tears, his heart was about to be torn apart. Her heart had died, leaving behind his heart, which was constantly trembling in fear. For the first time in his life, he felt a bone-deep fear and dread. He was afraid that she wouldn't be able to make it. He was afraid that she would leave him and the child in her stomach. He was afraid he had lost her. Later, her maternal instincts were awakened, and she began to try to eat, to try to talk, to try to get back on track. He was pleasantly surprised, but he was still very careful. He didn't want to touch her or hurt her at all. He didn't dare to be too happy. He was afraid that God would be jealous of him and take revenge on him. Once his dream was shattered, he would lose everything. He carefully guarded her and protected her. He was worried about her being in the hospital, so he brought her back to Yunshan Shi to nurse her pregnancy. The time she spent nurturing her fetus was the happiest time of her life. Chapter 29:35. Yun Shishir suddenly recalled that there were times when she wanted to eat cherries in the middle of the night. He and Gong Jia had searched through half of the capital before he found them and bought them back. However, she had lost her appetite and didn't eat a single one. He coaxed her to eat one or two before coaxing her back to sleep. As her husband, it could be said that she was able to recover so quickly because of his hard work. However, after the prenatal checkup and finding out that the fetus was stable and healthy and that her body was gradually getting back on track, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. For a moment, happiness filled his heart, and he was at a loss for what to do, so much so that he actually cried tears of joy. Even though he held it in, the rims of his eyes reddened, and the dampness on his eyelids touched her deeply. Mu Yaja hugged her, his lips trembling slightly as he gently caressed her face over and over again. Yun Shishir held back her tears and said reproachfully, "Are you really that happy knowing that it's a daughter?" She sniffled and said, half jokingly, "Looks like I really don't have any status in the future. Our daughter has become your heart, your liver, your spleen, lungs, and kidneys. What about me? Don't tell me I've become your duodenum, your appendix?" Mu Yaja smirked and said, "How can that be? Seeing how excited you are, I feel that I definitely won't have any status in the future. Our daughter is my heart, and you are my lungs. Both of them are equally important. The lungs don't seem to be as important as the heart." Yun Shishir deliberately fussed with him. "Look, our daughter is like a heart. Without our daughter, will your heart not be able to beat?" Upon hearing this, Mu Yaja laughed, thinking that she was jealous. He couldn't help but laugh. "You're even jealous of your own daughter? Can I be? Do you have a problem with that?" Sure. Mu Yaja held her face lovingly and looked at her delicate face lovingly. He smiled gently and said, "But without you, I can't even breathe." Yun Shishir was stunned. She was deeply moved by his incomparably sincere words. "Without you, I can't even breathe." She hugged him tightly as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes again. She couldn't stop sobbing. "Thank you for waiting for me for so long." She pursed her lips and hot tears fell on his shoulder. She smiled and said, I won't be so willful in the future. I won't scare you anymore. Yes, Muyaja smiled. She didn't know how much tenderness was hidden in his gaze when he looked at her. When Yu and Xiaoi Chen returned home from school, they could smell a sweet scent the moment they opened the door. When Xiaoi Chen smelled it, he almost drooled. He sniffed greedily for a long time, and his eyes lit up. Wow, it smells so good. Yu smelled it and said, This is the aroma of cake. Is it some important festival, or is it someone's birthday? He thought about it and realized that no one in the family was celebrating their birthday. The two little guys squeezed into the dining room one after the other. They saw Yun Shirshir sitting at the dining table with her hands supporting her cheeks. There were several delicious dishes in front of her, and in the middle was a 12-inch cake. It was sweet and tempting. Wow! Xiaoi Chen wiped his saliva. He was already famished when he returned home from school. When he saw this sumptuous scene, he was undoubtedly salivating. You're back. Chapter 2936. Yu and Xiaoi Chen looked at each other and asked curiously, Mommy, what's the occasion today? Why did you make a cake? You want to know? Yun Shirshir smiled mysteriously but deliberately didn't say anything. Muyaja walked out of the kitchen with a jug of fruit juice and an apron around his waist. He looked like a house husband. Yun Shirshir said that she wanted to drink freshly squeezed fruit juice, so he went into the kitchen and studied it for a while. Finally, he figured out how to make a jug of fruit juice. Yu's face turned slightly pale when she saw this. She looked at the table full of dishes, and then at the apron he was wearing. The corners of her lips twitched. Daddy, did you make this table full of dishes? Muyaja placed the jug of fruit juice on the table and glanced at them. Before he could say anything, a voice came from behind him. Of course not. An angry voice came from the kitchen. Yu and Xiaoi Chen looked over and saw Hua Jin walking out of the kitchen with an apron around his waist and beads of sweat on his face. He said angrily, How could your daddy possibly know how to cook? I made all of these. I ordered the cake from a cake shop. You know how to cook? Yu was even more surprised. Of course. Hua Jin patted his chest and said, I've been cooking since I was young. Yu didn't say anything on the surface, but she was secretly criticizing him in her heart. Would he get food poisoning after eating all of these dishes? Xiaoi Chen was also skeptical and didn't believe in Hua Jin's culinary skills. Yu said, Mommy hasn't answered me yet. What kind of occasion is it today? She even invited brother Hua Jin over. Hua Jin felt even more wronged when he heard this. Why can't I be a guest if it's not an important occasion? Yu chuckled and stuck out her tongue. Hua Jin continued, Also, you should change the way you address me. Call me uncle. Uncle. All right. Yu, Xiaoi Chen, it's time to eat. Go wash your hands quickly. I'll tell you the good news after you're done washing your hands. When Yu and Xiaoi Chen heard that it was good news, they didn't hesitate and immediately ran into the bathroom. When they returned to the dining room after washing their hands, Hua and Muyaja were already seated at the table. By the time they were done washing their hands, they returned to the dining room table. The two little lads sat down and asked eagerly, Mommy, it's time for you to answer us, isn't it? What's the good news? Muyaja and Yun Shirshir looked at each other. The former was smug, while the latter was a little shy. Under Yu and Xiaoi Chen's curious gazes, the man leaned forward and said mysteriously, You're going to be older brothers. Yu didn't think much of it when she heard this. Is this the good news? We knew it a long time ago. Yun Shirshir said angrily, Stop teasing them. Muyaja put his arm around her shoulders and smiled. Then he said to Yu and Xiaoi Chen, Congratulations. You're going to have a younger sister. Don't you think this is something worth celebrating? Younger sister. Yu and Xiao Chen were stunned for a moment. Xiao Chen was the first to react. He straightened his neck in excitement and said in surprise, "Really? Daddy, how did you know?" Yu looked at Mu Yaja strangely from the corner of her eyes. She was a little doubtful. That's right. Daddy, how did you know? Don't tease us. You're making us happy for nothing. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and deliberately kept them in suspense. Chapter 29:37. Yun Shirshir smiled and continued, "Today, Mommy went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup. The doctor told us after we did an ultrasound. He said that I'm carrying a little princess in my stomach. Aren't you going to be older brothers?" When Xiao Chen heard this, he was so excited that his eyebrows danced. Wow, really? Oh my God, it's really a little sister. Is my dream finally going to come true? Don't get so excited. Yu patted his shoulder and pretended to be calm. Are the ultrasound results accurate? I heard that some ultrasound results may not be accurate. Of course it's accurate. Silly. Mu Yaja glared at him and asked, "Are you saying that you prefer a little brother to a little sister?" "No," Yu instinctively insisted. "I prefer a little sister." But the surprise came too suddenly. Yu looked at Yun Shirshir's face, which was brimming with happiness. Then he looked at Mu Yaja and Hua Jin's faces, which were also filled with surprise. He finally believed it. However, compared to Xiao Chen, the way he expressed his surprise was very restrained, just like Mu Yaja. He pretended to be calm as he held his drink and tried to take a sip of juice to calm himself down. However, after drinking half the glass, he still couldn't suppress the ecstasy in his heart. He placed the glass on the table and looked extremely touched. The whole world suddenly bloomed with flowers and fireworks. He was in an extremely good mood. "I have a little sister." Yu clutched his chest. There, his heart was beating rapidly. He was touched, so touched. This was great news. Xiao Chen also said excitedly, "How long do I have to wait before I can hold my cute little sister?" "Why are you even more anxious than your daddy?" Hua Jin smiled and looked at him. "Wait a little longer. It'll take at least 6 months. Yu was much more attentive than Xiao Chen. He suddenly asked anxiously, "Mommy, since you've done the prenatal checkup, how's the baby?" Yun Shirshir couldn't hide her excitement and said, "It's very stable. Your sister is developing very well in my stomach. Very healthy. The doctor said that she will definitely be a smart little princess." The huge rock hanging in Yu's heart finally fell to the ground. He smiled with relief. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as it's healthy and safe. He had always been sensible. Even though he yearned for his mommy to give birth to a younger sister as an older brother, he would definitely dote on this younger sister. But some time ago, Mommy's health was terrible. He either went on a hunger strike or went blind. During that period of time, he felt as if the sky was about to collapse. Later on, he brought her home to nurse her back to health. Daddy pushed away a lot of work and took good care of her. The whole family was on tenterhooks, afraid that something would happen to the child in her stomach and bring another blow to Mommy. However, now that the prenatal checkup was done and the baby was doing well, he was completely relieved. Today is really a good day to celebrate. Hua Jin poured fruit juice for everyone and took the lead to raise his goblet. He said encouragingly, "Shouldn't we toast to celebrate?" "Okay." Mu Yaja nodded. Yun Shirshir smiled and reached out to touch the goblet. When Mu Yaja saw this, he thoughtfully pushed the goblet to her. She held it firmly and raised it carefully. She smiled sweetly and said, "Cheers." Cheers. Everyone raised their goblets in unison and clinked them gently with hers, making a pleasant clinking sound. Cheers! Everyone cheered in unison. Muyaja was especially happy. He drank the fruit juice in one gulp. You also drank the fruit juice in his goblet. When no one was paying attention to him, he gently reached out and quickly wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. Beside him, Xiao Yichen's sharp eyes noticed this and couldn't help but hug his shoulders emotionally. He smiled and said, We're going to be older brothers. Chapter 29:38. Yun Shishir felt extremely blessed, especially when she heard the sounds of the two little guys dancing around her and blowing out the candles. Hua Jin was making a racket at the side, bickering with little Yichen as they divided the cake. Yu, on the other hand, was pestering her, asking if she had thought of a name for his sister. A name? Yun Shishir narrowed her eyes and smiled. She asked tentatively, I thought of many names and discussed it with your daddy. Your daddy said that Yueyao is a nice name. It's poetic. Yu's face twitched. He said in disdain, Yueyao? That's not a nice name. Daddy has no taste at all. When Muyaja heard this, he smacked the back of his head unhappily. Ouch, it hurts. Yu held the back of his head and pouted unwillingly. I didn't say anything wrong. Daddy, why did you hit me? What's wrong with Yueyao? What's wrong with it? You argued. Don't you think that the name is too old-fashioned? Yun Shishir couldn't sit still anymore. When she heard Yu's complaints, she felt wronged. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. She reminded you carefully, Yu, Mommy was the one who came up with this name. Your daddy just picked this one. When Yu heard this, he looked embarrassed. He immediately cleared his throat and said awkwardly, Actually, this name is quite nice. Yueyao Mu, the jade pool fairy under the moon. Is that how it feels? Yes. This explanation of the name simply hit the nail on the head. Yun Shishir said contentedly, That's what I meant. Yueyao. What a beautiful name. Yueyao, Mu Yueyao. This name is not bad. Yu flattered. Mommy is indeed a top student. She can actually come up with such a nice name. Muyaja, who was standing at the side, was a little dissatisfied. His face was extremely dark. He reached out and pinched Yu's ear, pulling him to his side. Yun Tianyu, is this your stance? Just now in front of me, you kept saying that this name didn't sound good and complained about it over and over again. Why is it that when Mommy said that she came up with this name, you kept praising it? You shamelessly. Because it's really nice. If her surname was Yun, it would definitely sound even better. Surname Yun? Hearing this, Hua Jin raised an eyebrow, touched his chin, and suddenly laughed. Indeed, Yu has a point. Yun Yueyao is indeed much nicer than Mu Yueyao. Muyaja, Mu Yichen also chimed in, Yun Yueyao is nicer. Yun Yueyao is nicer. All right, let little sister take Mommy's surname. Hearing this, Yu chuckled and said half-jokingly, Daddy will be heartbroken and can't bear to. If little sister's surname is Mu, Daddy may not be willing. No. Muyaja, however, said, Yun is fine too. He lowered his gaze and looked lovingly at Yun Shishir's slightly bulging belly. He smiled and said, whether her surname is Yun or Mu, she's still my daughter. Wow. Yu was excited when he heard this. Daddy, are you really willing? If little sister and Mommy have the same surname, then little sister and I will have the same surname. Chapter 29:39. On the surface, he was all smiles, but deep down, Yu was well aware of this fact. Muyaja really did not have much of a fixation on the issue of surnames. Back then, when he officially announced Yu's identity to the public, he did not say that he would change Yu's surname. That was because Yu said that Yun Tianyu was a name given to him by his mother, and he could not change a single word of it. His surname was Yun, and it would be Yun for the rest of his life. He would never change it back to Mu. Mu Yaja knew how stubborn he was, so he naturally would not insist on it. However, Yu did not expect his father to not have much of a fixation on his sister's surname either. So it's decided then. Yun Shusher smiled and sought his opinion. Yun Yueyao? I think it sounds good, too. All right. What's important is that you think it sounds good. Yu and Xiao Chen were caught off guard and were fed a mouthful of food. Daddy, Mommy, is it really okay to torture us like this? They are still children. Can't you let them off? Let's eat the cake. Yu mercilessly interrupted the loving scene between the two and started to eat the cake. Hua Jin had already cut and distributed the cake. Yu placed the biggest piece in front of Yun Shusher and smilingly said, Mommy, quickly eat. HM? Yun Shusher reached out to feel for the cutlery. Yu considerately passed the cutlery to her and said reproachfully, Mommy, it's not convenient for you to eat. If you need anything, just tell me, and I'll get it for you. I can't always rely on you. Yun Shusher continued. Don't tell me that I can't see for the rest of my life and have to rely on you to serve me. It's only right for a son to serve Mommy. You emphasized. Besides, who said that Mommy won't be able to see for the rest of her life? At the mention of this, Hua Jin furrowed his brows and asked worriedly, Oh yeah, did the doctor say when the surgery will be decided? The smile on Yun Shusher's face stiffened slightly. Mu Yaja glanced at him and frowned. Suddenly, he said, The doctor said that if we do the surgery now, the medication might affect the fetus in the womb. Why? Hua Jin did not know that much. He only knew that if he lost his sight, he could have a cornea transplant as soon as possible so that he could regain his sight. Because during the surgery, some of the drugs used will have a certain degree of toxicity. During a pregnant woman's pregnancy, there were some drugs that had to be avoided at all costs. Otherwise, it would easily affect the normal development of the fetus. In serious cases, miscarriages and deformities were possible. Shusher wanted to protect the child. No matter what, even if she won't be able to see for the rest of her life, there's still me. Yun Shusher smiled and interlocked her fingers with his. Her smile was gentle. Hua Jin furrowed his brows, looking worried. He clenched his fists and said, hesitantly, a cornea donor should be something that can only be found by chance. I heard that there's a donor now, so we should be able to perform the surgery immediately. Mu Yaja was stunned for a moment. He looked up, and a strange look flashed across his face. He looked at Hua Jin deeply and thought about it for a while. Suddenly, he asked, How do you know that there's a cornea donor now? Hua Jin wanted to say something, but stopped. He glanced at Yun Shusher, but did not say anything in the end. He only said calmly, I just heard about it. Mu Yaja smiled and said casually, It's okay. There will always be a chance. Don't think too much. Hua Jin nodded absent-mindedly. Chapter 2940. After dinner, Yu and Xiao Chen helped Yun Shusher to go shopping. Mu Yaja and Hua Jin walked into the back garden one after the other. After a long silence, Mu Yaja suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around. His deep gaze fell on him as he asked suspiciously, When you mentioned the cornea donor just now, were you referring to the cornea donor Gu Xingze donated? Hua Jin looked at him and was a little surprised. You know about this? Yes, I know. Mu Yaja nodded. Qin Zhou talked to me about this matter. Back then, when Qin Zhou was packing up Gu Xingze's belongings, he found a few volunteer forms that Gu Xingze had filled out personally. It was a volunteer form for organ donation. Qin Zhou could not help but be a little surprised. He did not know when Gu Xingze had signed this volunteer form. In addition to the liver and kidney, it also included a pair of corneas. Gu Xing's corneas. Initially, Qin Zhou could not bear to see Gu Xing's leave this world in one piece. He could not bear to see Gu Xing's body being riddled with holes by those cold surgical machines after his death. Therefore, he had originally planned to burn these volunteer forms. However, in the end, he thought of Yun Shirshir. If Gu Xing's organ donation could save other people's lives, wouldn't it be a special way to continue living in this world? Even if he left this world in one piece, he would only be burned to ashes in the end. If other patients were given a new lease of life because of his organ transplants, to Qin Zhou, it was as if Gu Xing's had also been reborn. Therefore, he took the volunteer forms and went to the hospital. Soon, the hospital dissected his body and removed the donated organs. Finally, they carefully removed his corneas. Qin Zhou found Mu Yaja and gave him a suggestion. Before Xingzhe was born, he filled in a few donation applications. One of them was a pair of corneas, but time is of the essence. Unless Shirshir performs the surgery as soon as possible, I'm afraid there's no hope. Corneal transplantation was not as simple as it seemed. Donors were difficult to find because the current world's views were not so advanced. Most people were more conservative when it came to death. Furthermore, the donation form had to be filled in before death. In the eyes of the people, this was too unlucky. In addition, there were more and more patients with eye diseases, and there was a serious shortage of corneas. The reason why it was said to be a rare opportunity was that cornea transplants required a lot of time. Generally speaking, the cornea donor must be immediately stored in the preservation solution within 48 hours after removal and put into surgery as soon as possible. Other than a few large cities, other small cities did not have any eye banks to store them. Therefore, once a cornea donor was found, surgery was needed immediately. Otherwise, the success rate of the surgery would be difficult to guarantee. Qin Zhou hoped that he could use Xingzhe's cornea to restore Yun Shirshir's sight. I think Xingzhe must be very willing to use his cornea in exchange for Shirshir's sight, right? Shirshir can also take Xingzhe's place and see this prosperous world, Qin Zhou said. Mu Yaja frowned. It had been 8 hours since the cornea was removed. In other words, the surgery had to be performed as soon as possible. But